Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, I'm sorry. Sit down. We've got to call the roll call first.
Directors Osborne and Zini and Dwyer present. Directors Veerkamp and Day absent. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, Clerk of the Board Sullivan present.
Okay, now we will rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Osborne, would you start us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have some baseball fans.
President Anzini, Director Day is unable to attend in person today as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 emergency. He has requested the ability to participate via teleconference. In order for Director Day to participate remotely, the board must take certain findings required by the Brown Act.
Prior to adopting today's agenda, in order for Director Day to participate, it's necessary for the board to take two actions. The first is, since making findings that would allow Director Day to participate was not agendized, the board must first decide whether or not certain requirements are met to add something that was not on the agenda to the agenda, and I'm going to explain what we need to do in order to do that. The second action would be, assuming the board adds the item to the agenda, is to then make findings related to the COVID-19 emergency that would allow us under the Brown Act to hold what is defined as a teleconference meeting. That is a meeting in which we are participating both in person and in which one of our members of the legislative body is participating remotely. First and foremost, to add an item to the agenda, either one of two circumstances must exist. The first is that a matter requiring urgent attention of the board came to light after the agenda was published, and that matter requires urgent action of the board by a vote of 2/3 majority of the board. The second item is, in an emergency condition, the board can vote to add an item to its agenda by a simple majority. Because of the ongoing declaration by the governor and our local officials regarding COVID-19 and the need to be able to conduct remote or hybrid meetings, I believe that there is legal justification for the board to make a determination that there is an emergency as that term is defined in the Brown Act. So I am recommending first that the board take a vote to add an item to its agenda that would allow Director Day to participate remotely. That is the option that we've placed on the in the PowerPoint here as option 1, which is to, I'm having trouble seeing it.
Make a determination. Option 1 would be make a determination that an emergency situation exists as defined in the Brown Act under Government Code Section 54956.5A1 and amend the agenda to add the following action pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2B1. Adopt a resolution finding that current conditions related to COVID-19 require teleconference participation by a member or members of the board pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3 is take no action.
Move one. Second.
All right, it's been motioned by Director Osborne, second by Director Dwyer, to put this item on the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, Please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This would only be public comment for adding this item to the agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on adding this to the agenda. Option 1 moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer, and we are ready for a vote.
Okay. Board members vote.
Division 1, 2, and 4 voting aye. Motion carries.
So I do have one question for our attorney, and doesn't this is an advance notice of what will happen in January 1st for all public agencies?
So the next item, the next action that the board needs to take is to adopt an agenda. I'm sorry. Now that you've added this item to the agenda, the next action that you will take is to adopt a resolution that makes the findings required under the Brown Act in order to conduct a teleconference meeting. Now, that would, to answer your question, Director Anzini, allow the board to conduct the teleconference meeting today. And then if it became necessary to do so in future meetings, the board would have to reassess the situation. If the circumstances still exist, that is to say, there's still an ongoing declared emergency by the governor, there's still ongoing guidance by our local officials to promote social distancing to allow virtual meetings, then yes, we would continue to be able to do that going forward. Starting January 1st, getting to your point, there's recently enacted legislation that becomes effective January 1st. That will also allow the board to conduct virtual or hybrid meetings like this under the same circumstances that I just described. And there are additional provisions of that legislation that aren't necessarily relevant today. But yes, January 1st, those provisions become effective.
Okay. Our next,
The next action would be to adopt the agenda. Adopt the resolution.
right.
The resolution of the Board of Directors, El Dorado Irrigation District, making findings and declaring its intent to conduct remote teleconference meeting pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E due to the threat of COVID-19.
Okay. Board members,
No, I gotta read the resolution.
you got to read the rest of it.
Because we did not have
Okay.
time to publish this with the board packet so that the public could have a chance to review it, and so the board could have a chance to review it, I've asked Jennifer to go ahead and read the resolution for full transparency and disclosure. It's kind of wordy, but it's not that long, so if you'll
And
indulge us.
a copy of the draft resolution is also available back of the room. Whereas the Government Code Section 54953E authorizes remote teleconference participation in meetings by members of a legislative body, subject to the existence of certain conditions. And whereas a required condition is that a state of emergency is declared by the governor pursuant to Government Code Section 8625, and whereas the governor of the state of California proclaimed a state of emergency on March 4th, 2020, related to the threat of COVID-19, which means in effect as amended by subsequent executive orders, and whereas on September 30th, 2021, the County of El Dorado Public Health Officer recommended social distancing measures to allow for virtual attendance meetings of the board to continue after September 30th, 2021, and whereas the COVID-19 virus continues to pose imminent risk to health and safety and directly impacts the ability of the public and the board to meet safely in person. Accordingly, the board hereby recognizes the proclamation of state of emergency by the governor of the state of California and the recommendations of the El Dorado County Public Health Officer regarding physical distancing, and whereas as a consequence of the emergency related to COVID-19, to allow for physical distancing and to allow for meeting participants to isolate when experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. The board invokes the provision of Government Code Section 54953E. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved and ordered by the El Dorado Irrigation Board of Directors that the foregoing recitals are true and correct. The meeting of the board, including this meeting, may be held pursuant to the provisions Government Code Section 54953E due to the impacts of COVID-19, the governor's state of emergency proclamation, state and local recommendations, and the importance of physical distancing to minimize any potential adverse health and safety risks. The Board of Directors hereby directs staff to take all actions necessary to carry out the intent and purpose of this resolution, including conducting opening and public meetings of the board in accordance with Government Code Section 54953E and other applicable provisions of the Brown Act for remote teleconference meetings. The Board of Directors further directs staff to continue to monitor the health and safety conditions related to COVID-19, the status of the governor's state of emergency, the local orders related to physical distancing, and the state regulations related to social distancing, and present to the board at its next regularly scheduled meeting the related information and recommendations for remote meetings pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953E3. I'm not going to read this. This is just a copy of the resolution. This is the resolution that I just read. This is the draft resolution.
And so staff is recommending that the board adopt the resolution as presented.
Option 1, adopt resolution finding that current conditions relating to the COVID-19 require teleconference participation by a member or members of the board pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board, or take no action. Board preference.
Okay, board?
I'll move option 1
Second.
with a quick comment. It really, I think we all support open meetings and transparency, but it shouldn't be this hard.
Exactly.
All right,
We're waiting for a second.
yes. I'll second it.
Second.
Did you second?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been motioned by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne to adopt this resolution.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instruction on page 2 of today's agenda if you are participating remotely. If you would like to make a comment and you're here, you just stand up and proceed to the microphone. And this would be a public comment period for the adoption of this resolution. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne.
Okay, board members vote. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'll vote, but I gotta make an announcement.
On this?
No, on another issue.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Division 1, 2, and 4, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay.
My daughter's having surgery, had just got out of surgery, and I'm gonna make a quick call. Now that we have a quorum, I'll be right back.
Okay. I understand.
Could we just get Director Day to sort of enter his appearance here in the meeting today so that we do, in fact, have a quorum of the board?
Yes. Director Dray.
Can you hear me? I am here.
We can. Thank you very much, President Day.
And I will, I'll just second Pat's comment that if we can look at ways to streamline this so that, other things like this are going to happen where we don't want to expose our fellow board members or members of the public. And hopefully we can find a way so we don't have to go through this. I thank everybody, but 15 minutes is a long time.
Thanks, Director Day. And just so the board is aware that this is the kind of item that would normally be on the consent calendar. This would not require any attention of the board other than as part of the consent calendar. And moving forward, that's what I would expect. This circumstance was a little bit unique because, as I said, we found out about it after the board agenda was published and didn't have an opportunity to proceed on the consent calendar. But understood. I appreciate the frustration and I sympathize.
First of all, I'd like to thank our attorney for coming up with this, and our board clerk for coming up with this, because we all saw this coming 3 years ago, that there was going to be a problem sometimes when even board members who have connected family members who are in the hospital or having surgery, we are afraid we're going to take it to our family members. So I understand Director Day's concern. I hope that as of January 1st, with the new state law, that this gives us better telecommunication options for participation. It's not the best, but it's the best to start with. And we will get better. And this also includes the full transparency of our community participation. So I appreciate everybody here and online for their patience. Thank you. All right.
The next thing on the that we have is the adoption of the agenda, and from this point forward, I will be doing roll call vote since. Can you move it back to what it was? Since Director Day is participating remotely.
Yes. A motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay. This is an opportunity for public comment.
If you'd like to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, you can come up to the microphone here or refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda.
I'd like to remind those in the audience that if you're going to make a comment on anything that's not on the agenda, you will have that opportunity down the agenda. So. All right.
Does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. We're ready for the vote. How do you vote? Excuse me. How do you vote Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, vote aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, communications. Report from the general manager.
I have one recognition today that I'd like to share to the board, and then later on I'll have one staff report under General Manager's Communications.
Okay.
The recognition we received was an email from Christopher Beach, an EID customer in El Dorado Hills. It's a long comment, so I'll kind of summarize it. He wanted to commend you and overall management of EID, your communication skills, and your transparency with your customers. I particularly enjoy reading your updates on the repairs to the department's infrastructure and facilities in the wake of the damage caused by last year's fire. It goes on, I admire your positive, upbeat attitude, as well as pointing out the dedication of EID employees, your focus on their safety, and the fact that the projects are completed ahead of schedule and under budget. So it's really good news. He's been a public servant for over 40 years, and getting this type of recognition is very much appreciated. That concludes the recognitions.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to approach the microphone or raise their hand online to speak to anything that's not on the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please come up to the microphone or refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda if you are participating remotely. This is the public comment for any items not appearing on today's agenda. And we do have one person wishing to speak. Please state your name for the record, Mr. Lovell.
Good morning, I'm Brian Lovell from El Dorado Hills. At the August 8th board meeting, the general manager gave a presentation including goals for the next 5 years. He noted the update to the 2013 water was in progress. Then he said, should we upgrade transmission and treatment to maximize use of existing water rights where they are, or is it White Rock, or is it something else? Action item 5 of the March 25th, 2013 board meeting was consideration of the adoption of the Integrated Water Resources Master Plan, which the board voted to adopt. That presentation showed the 7 schemes studied, including option 1A and 1C, called gravity supply, and option 2, pump supply from Folsom Lake. The action item 5 summary recommended a blend of options 1A and 1C, the gravity supply option. It included the schedule, the budget, and the phasing. Page 5 of the summary presentation stated the major component of the plan includes a diversion at White Rock and a new water treatment plant. So the decision of whether or not to maximize transmission and treatment with water rights where they are was made 9 years ago, and there appear to be no records to show why that decision was canceled. Table 7.2 on page 184 of the 2013 water plan is a present worth analysis of the 7 options studied. The capital and operating costs for the gravity supply option were $527 million, and the capital and operating costs to continue pumping from Folsom Lake were $117 million higher. These cost projections assume a 3% power cost inflation rate, long before all the debacles caused by looting and mismanagement at PG&E were known to the public. In the appendix is a study showing cost differentials into the several hundred million to continue pumping from Folsom Lake if PG&E rates rise faster than 3%, which has already happened. After Elizabeth Leeper finished her presentation at the August 22 board meeting, I heard her remark that the upstream diversion could not meet peak demand at El Dorado Hills. In the 2013 master plan, figure 8.1, page 195, the capacity of the proposed facility at White Rock is 44 million gallons a day. That is more than double the capacity of the newly rebuilt Folsom Lake pump station. Budget figures for the White Rock facility are also based on a capacity of 44 million gallons a day. So the upstream diversion would have met peak demand at El Dorado Hills far into the future, or it could have been downsized for a substantial cost reduction, but to say the planned facility couldn't meet peak demand at El Dorado Hills is flat out wrong. I urge all listening today, and especially the board members, to read and comprehend the 2013 Integrated Water Resources Master Plan to understand just how costly it has been to the district to not have done the upstream diversion as originally scheduled, and how very costly it would be to maximize transmission and treatment within the existing location of water rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Are there any other commenters who want to come?
President Anzini, it does not appear any additional members of the public are wishing to speak on our open comment period.
Great. All right. We'll move on to communications.
Thank you. Elizabeth Leeper will be making a small presentation regarding the modification of our water right permit 2112, and it also directly addresses some of the issues Mr. Lovell brought up about the complexities of trying to get water right diversions at different locations. So Elizabeth, please.
Yes.
Good morning, President Anzini and members of the board. Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the district, and I'll be providing a brief report regarding the modification of water right permit 2112 project. The district issued a California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, notice of preparation for a revised Permit 2112 project on September 21st, 2022, last week. The revised project will focus on adding one additional point of diversion rather than two. Previously, the project included adding two additional points of diversion, one at Khyber's diversion, and the second at the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, otherwise known as SMUD, diversion at either the White Rock Penstock or the Slab Creek Dam Reservoir location. As we have progressed with modeling for these two new proposed points of diversion, it became increasingly clear that they have very different characteristics, including but not limited to the anticipated diversion patterns, the infrastructure needed to divert water at each respective point of diversion, and the costs and timeline for being able to put water to beneficial use. With these considerations in mind, the district has decided to change the project to focus on adding the Khyber's diversion as the only additional point of diversion from the South Fork at this time. The district is also seeking to utilize the Khyber's diversion in conjunction with off-stream storage in Jenkinson Lake through the use of Hazel Creek Tunnel to provide greater operational flexibility. Therefore, the project also seeks to add Jenkinson Lake as an authorized place of storage and as a point of rediversion to storage to allow for storage of Permit 2112 water in Jenkinson Lake. This is an important component of the project as it allows water to be diverted during periods when it is more readily available, such as during the winter and spring, and stored until needed during peak consumptive demand periods in the summer. The district believes the refined project, with a focus on a Khyber's diversion and Jenkinson Lake storage, will help streamline the process moving forward. This change means that the district is deferring pursuit of adding a point of diversion at either SMUD's White Rock, Penstock, or Slab Creek Dam Reservoir at this time. And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
And if Mr. Lovell is still on the phone, just to respond to your concern, in the 2013 plan, it is a plan, but plans just don't get implemented based on a plan. You have to go through different water rights, points of diversions, a lot of other very significant efforts to try and implement the plan. And as we're trying to do things, things change, and we're making this change because it's more immediate and it could benefit our customers much quicker than White Rock. That may be in a long-term plan, but right now we're not pursuing that. Thank you.
Okay, Director Dwyer.
Actually, I had a question for Elizabeth. Two questions, really. One is we just let a contract to do the hydrological and environmental studies for those additional points of diversion. Are we now abandoning those efforts and focusing on the Khyber's? And will we get a reduction in the cost of that contract?
Excellent questions. So I'm happy to report part of the strategic decision-making here was to identify a point in both the modeling and environmental review process where we could make a revision to the project without essentially abandoning any of the investments we've already made. And so to date, the investment has really been in foundational hydrologic modeling, which is really modeling out the district's current operations, historical hydrology, accurate representations of SMUD's existing operation. So we're really building out how does the existing system operate. And so we were at a very good juncture to refine and revisit the project without really losing any of that investment. So that foundational modeling will still be the basis of the more refined project, which is the Khyber's diversion. I do think that there's going to be efficiencies gained with the refined project. It's a much more streamlined project with near-term benefits. It also does simplify some of the stakeholder negotiations, particularly we were going to have to negotiate an entire operational plan with SMUD for the White Rock diversion. And so I really think the efficiencies is going to be more in the environmental document, which is going to be a more streamlined document with a focus on near-term benefits. And so I think we'll see efficiencies both in the schedule overall, as well as efficiencies in the cost of developing that environmental document.
Thank you. And doesn't that parallel or interface with the El Dorado County Water Agency's plan? Aren't they also doing studies and modeling of the same watershed?
I would be hesitant to characterize what El Dorado County Water Agency is doing. I do know that they're looking at future plans for potential use of water in the county. But I think that their efforts are somewhat independent from what the district's pursuing at this time. But we're always looking for synergy and efficiency with our county partners.
And I'll make it a threefer instead of a twofer. So the last question, I think Dan has answered this before, but I just want to make sure that our existing infrastructure at Kybers and the conveyance down to the forebay is sufficient to handle the increased volume. And I see heads going, yeah.
Yes, and I think Dan has confidence in me to briefly respond to operational questions. It's not exactly intuitive, but this project, essentially, we're already diverting essentially the quantity of water at Kybers that we're discussing here. But instead of that water going to hydropower non-consumptive uses for power generation, we're really planning for a future where we have higher customer demands. And so essentially that same block of water is now going to be dedicated to consumptive needs of our customers. But the beauty of this Kybers project is we do have all the existing infrastructure in place. And so once we get through permitting, environmental review, and all of the necessary regulatory approvals, this really is a turn the knob tomorrow project.
Yeah, that's good, because that's the point I wanted to make, is we don't have to build additional infrastructure to take advantage of these rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right.
I got a question. It's like, how come?
Could you come up to the?
Sorry.
Yes, it is okay. Just come to the microphone and tell us who you are.
I'm curious why we
Could you tell
can't-
us who you are, please?
Oh, my name's Louis Bradley.
Okay.
I live at Hidden Lake.
All right.
I'm curious why we can't capture the power and recover the water at the same time. Why can't we do that? I mean, can't we generate the power and then move the water to a storage place where we can utilize it for customers? I mean, I don't get that.
Another great question. So a lot of this is dependent on the nature of our water rights. Water rights are very specific about where you can divert, how much you can divert, and for what uses. Fortunately for the district, our existing hydropower operations, that water already does double duty in terms of we can actually then use that water at Folsom for our demands there. This project, we're really looking at where we can use this water, and so we're trying to get some upstream use of this water and have a more gravity-fed system. And so we are getting double duty out of hydropower water already. We're just trying to enable our water rights to have the flexibility to meet future demands at the locations of growth. So we're always looking for those efficiencies, and fortunately for us, we already do get double duty out of our hydropower water.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any more from the general manager?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anything from the clerk of the board?
No, thank you.
Board of directors? Director Osborne?
This is for Dan. Excuse me, 5 of us were fishing for 3 days in Caples Lake, 0 fish, so I'm going to hand grenades.
I believe that's illegal, right?
Quick.
Yes, Director Dwyer.
Yeah, I do have a comment. I was contacted by one of our customers, actually in, off of Bass Lake Road, so that would have been in your division. I talked to the general manager. He was concerned about notification of water outages in the Bass Lake community. I know staff is working on that. We pride ourselves, I think, and have worked very hard to be open and transparent and do the best job we can with communicating with our customers. So I look forward to a resolution of that.
Yes. Director Day, do you have anything to mention?
No, thank you.
And I will also kind of piggyback to what Director Dwyer, occasionally I get those emails coming through, and of course, I always look at the question from our customers, especially those I represent, and it's always a conclusion of we're doing something wrong, and it's generally we aren't doing anything wrong, it's just that people are not as informed or haven't been reading their inserts in the bill. But, you know, for instance, the Bass Lake relocation of our staff down to a Latrobe area. And there were some considerations happening there, and a lot of people did not realize we're relocating our maintenance yard from the Bass Lake. And that this is a cooperation, this decision was made about 3 years ago, but now people are starting to see the efforts, and it is not to discourage people to not ask these questions, but what it is to, I encourage people to read what's happening in our newsletters that we send out. We put stuff on Nextdoor, and we also have a Facebook page. So, but I will read those emails, so thank you. We will now move to approve the consent calendar. Are there any items that any board member wants to pull from the consent calendar for additional discussion?
Move one.
I'll second.
Okay. So it's been motioned by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer to approve the consent calendar as presented.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please come up to the microphone or refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is any public comment on the approval of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Dwyer. President Anzini, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak. I believe we are ready for the vote.
Okay.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we will move to the public hearing. This is, it's in your hands, General Counsel.
Public hearing is opened at 9:38 a.m.
The benefit of coming up to the podium after Elizabeth Leeper has been here is that for the first time in my life, I actually get to raise the microphone. Felt kind of cool. I'm kidding. Good morning, President Anzini, members of the board, and good morning to the members of the public that are here. First, let me just say how much I appreciate you coming to be here to participate in today's public hearing. I know some of you likely took off work to be here. So my apologies to you that we got started a little bit later than we normally would have this morning, but here we are, and so I'm pleased to be able to present this item to the board and public today, which is my recommendation that the El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors dissolve Improvement District 34M for the reasons that I'm going to talk about later today. Next slide. Here I've listed on this slide a number of items that the board has previously considered regarding Hidden Lake and ID 34M. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but the gist of it is that this is an issue that's been before the board before and the community, and so there's a long history here. Next slide, please. So let me start with a little bit of background. Those of you from the members of the public that are here will recognize many of these slides because the basis of today's presentation was largely pulled from the PowerPoint presentation that I shared with you at our community meeting back in July. But a little bit of background, ID 34M, Improvement District 34M, was established in 1968 for the purpose of collecting funds by annual assessment from the properties located within its geographical boundaries, which is largely the Hidden Lake area, which is located in the Luneman general vicinity of Luneman Road. In order to perform maintenance activities at the surrounding property of Hidden Lake. EID intermittently collected assessment dues throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and intermittently in the 1990s up until the early 2000s. ID 34M, and this is important, it serves no operational purpose for EID and never has. It's never been connected to our water supply facilities. It's never performed any function related to our mission, which is to provide drinking water to our customers. Dissolution of ID 34M, which is what I'm recommending, would essentially terminate the district's ability to levy annual fees on the property owners within that area. Next slide, please. So continuing with the background and a little bit of the character of ID 34M and the property, here's a visual of what Hidden Lake looks like on the screen here. I think I mentioned that it consists of approximately 10 acres that sit atop 2 undeveloped parcels. The lake is formed by a small dam and is fed by what I understand to be natural springs. There is no significant inflow, such as from a perennial stream or anything like that. So far as I'm aware, it's used for recreational purposes by the surrounding landowners and for no other purpose. Next slide, please. I mentioned the point, I just mentioned that first point on this slide. And we've talked about the purpose for which ID 34M was formed. Importantly, there are approximately 180 parcels within the roughly 1,000 acres of land incorporated into the improvement district. There's the historical assessment value, 50 cents per $100 of assessed value as determined by the county assessor. And we levied those costs from, until the early 1990s. The properties, the 2 parcels, the 2 5-acre parcels were acquired by EID in the 1970s. And next slide, please. By the early 90s, it was evident to district staff, at least, that number one, that we probably weren't doing a very good job of maintaining the property, and yet we were collecting fees to do so. And given that it was unrelated to our operations, it was just sort of this side thing that staff had to go out and kind of take care of. And there just wasn't, we're not staffed to be able to provide community amenities like, for example, the county parks department or a community association, a recreational association or some kind. And so by the mid-1990s, staff was recommending to the board that the board should dissolve ID 34M and transfer ownership of the parcels so that they no longer posed any kind of burden or liability on the district. Relatedly, the district was taking a similar action to another improvement district that was located not far away from ID 34M. That one was called Improvement District 32M, and that was located in the general vicinity of Lake Arrowby, which is, as I indicated, not very far from Hidden Lake itself. In 1996, the district board of directors, it took that action to dissolve ID 32M, and it transferred ownership of the underlying parcels of Lake Arrowby to a local homeowners association, or it's a landowners association. They're called Four Corners Landowners Association. I could be wrong about this, but I think it's sometimes called Hidden Lake Homeowners Association. Maybe I made that up, I'm not certain. I know we have at times had representatives of Four Corners, and they may be participating remotely today. But in any event, Four Corners Landowners Association is the association that now owns the parcels surrounding Lake Arrowby and the parcels that once were included in ID 32M. Unfortunately, at the time that the district board of directors took that action to transfer ownership of Lake Arrowby to the Four Corners Landowner Association, it did not at that time dissolved 34M, ID 34M, which is the subject of today's hearing, largely as far as I can tell from the documents we have in the historical record, because there was not a similar homeowners association that was willing and or able to take ownership of the Hidden Lake properties like the Four Corners Landowners Association was for Lake Arrowby. Consequently, the board took no action at that time, and ID 34M has essentially remained on the books. For a brief time after 2000, the board of directors instructed staff to sort of try again with maintaining the improvement district for the purpose which it was formed. And so for a brief period of time in the early 2000s, the district, you could go to the next slide, the district did re-levy its annual assessments, but that didn't last very long. And by 2005, the district has stopped collecting any kind of annual assessments entirely from the property owners within ID 34M. In 2011, as part of a much larger look at property maintenance throughout the district board of directors declared the Hidden Lake parcel, and I say that singular parcel, and I'll talk about why that is, to be surplus to the district's needs, and instructed the district staff to, along with many other parcels, approximately 30 at the time, to look at ways to transfer ownership of those parcels. Some of them were very, very small parcels that was easy to dispose of. Some are much larger, which the district still maintains because conditions haven't yet been right to do that kind of transfer. But in any event, the lone parcel that the district still owns at Hidden Lake has been declared surplus to the district's needs since 2011. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the district, the Hidden Lake occupies 2 5-acre parcels. One of them, though the district acquired both of them in the 1970s, for reasons that are unknown to me, the district transferred ownership of one of the parcels to Four Corners Landowners Association at the same time it transferred ownership of the Lake Arrowby properties in 1996. I have said to the board and I've said to the public, I don't know why that happened. It is possible that it was inadvertent. It's also possible that at the time there was an understanding that Four Corners would, take an active role in the activities at Hidden Lake. I just don't know. But in any event, this is the current situation. EID owns one of the parcels and Four Corners Landowners Association owns the other. Next slide, please. I mentioned that EID declared its ownership of the singular parcel to be surplus in 2011. And I talked about this, or I at least mentioned it at the beginning, that Hidden Lake does not benefit EID ratepayers. It is a liability to the district, both from a general liability standpoint, as also from a cost liability standpoint, since we're not collecting revenue from the property owners. Nor do I believe that we really have a legal basis any longer to do so. Even if the district did say, well, we're gonna continue to maintain it. The irrigation district law just does not provide the kind of authority that an entity would need to be able to operate this lake for purely recreational purposes. Now, if it were connected to our water supply facility, much like, for example, Jenkinson Lake, well then, providing recreational amenities is squarely within the authority of the district because it's our water supply facilities. But in this case, it's too attenuated, I think, to make that case. Next slide, please. In July of this year, the district, anticipating this proceeding, mailed a notice out to the property owners within ID 34M that we would like to hold a community meeting to share the information that I've been talking about today and to get their input. We held that meeting on July 27th at Sutter's Mill Elementary School, and it was attended by more than a dozen local residents, some of whom I see in the audience today, and perhaps there are others that are attending virtually with us as well. We shared information. I shared the PowerPoint that looked very similar to the one that we're looking at right now. I shared information about why I believe it's time for the district to dissolve ID 34M. Excuse me. And we got a lot of constructive input from the community members. A lot of folks shared with us their history with Hidden Lake. A lot of them shared a lot of stuff I didn't know about how the district came into possession of the properties, how Hidden Lake became the kind of community asset that it has become. And so it was a valuable meeting. It was also an opportunity, I think, for to be fully transparent with the property owners there. I indicated to them at the time, and I still believe that lake has served their community, and that there is value in having it continue to serve their community. I'm just not sure that EID is in a position to be able to provide that kind of service. And so, part of that meeting, and I think part of this meeting, should be a space where community members can express their ideas about what the future of Hidden Lake looks like, so that we can be working together toward that end, whatever it is. Next slide, please. Dissolving ID 34M is, I'll call it kind of a technical step. In and of itself, this action, should the board decide to take it, it will have no legal effect on the ownership of the parcel. The district will continue to own that parcel unless and until it decides to transfer ownership, either through selling to a private party, potentially. And these are some of the options that we discussed at the community meeting. Selling the parcel to a private party, transferring ownership to a community organization such as a homeowners association or something like that, so that the lake could continue to serve its current and existing purpose, is also a possibility. So, but as far as today's action, the effect of dissolving the improvement district is really just a technical action to manifest the district's intent to relinquish its ownership and control, and most especially relinquish its power to levy fees and assessments on the property owners within Hidden Lake. Next slide. So, I'm sorry, backing up to the one, just to put a finer point on it, there's nothing that the board can do today that will in any way affect the current ownership of that parcel, because we haven't agendized that, and there's a little bit more process that would need to be undertaken. But as I said, this is an opportunity. Certainly, it's not lost on me. I'm not trying to say that, we're not transferring the parcel, we're just dissolving the improvement district. No, not at all. I recognize that dissolving the improvement district is manifesting the district's intent to transfer ownership of that parcel. But that's not a part of today's action. That would be a part of a future board action if and when the district, at some point in the future, if the district decides today to dissolve the improvement district. So with that, I am recommending, next slide please, the first option, which is to adopt a resolution dissolving Improvement District 34M, and I look forward to the questions and comments both from the board and public.
Director Osborne.
Move one. I would like this process to continue to find the appropriate entity to transfer the land and the whole ball of wax to an appropriate agency.
Okay, Director Day.
I'll second that.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Day to move with option one to dissolve Improvement District 34M. Now discussion. This is an opportunity for the public to come forward. I would ask you to identify yourselves first, and I'm going to limit it to 2 minutes if you can. Unless there's a huge, long line.
Oh, no, I don't think it will
Yes, please
be. My
identify.
name is Tony Bartholomew.
Okay.
I live in the Hidden Lake area. I have been to Hidden Lake several times. In fact, involved in a crew to upkeep the lake, and it's more than we can do. I have a little tractor, and my neighbor has a little tractor, so we improved the road that goes down to the lake because there was big rivers in it. the lake is getting overcome by bushes and trees, and since EID has abandoned it since 2011, there's a lot of work to be done there just to keep it up. Not necessarily for recreation, just because you can't just let it go to pod. And I don't understand if EID is going to just absolve themselves of the lake, yet still hold ownership. It just seems silly to me that they aren't responsible for upkeep. And they haven't been for 11 years. People in the area do use it for fishing. They have a little raft in there that floats, and they go out on the little raft. And there's not a lot of people that use it, but there are people that use it, and for recreation. So it's not just sitting there, not used by anybody for anything. And that's the point I'm getting here, is that let's just get rid of it. Let's say it doesn't exist because nobody uses it and nobody cares. And I just disagree with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Me again, Lewis Bradley. My property literally backs up to the lake. Like he said, my wife and we have gone down there, removed brush, taken trash out, you know, maintained the property for quite a long time. I have no problem with donating money for upkeep of the lake, you know. I mean, everything. I mean, the prisoners came in, removed brush and stuff not too long ago, and I think it was just a ploy to try to sell the place illegally. But, you know, again, they used to come down there like once a month and do cleanup around the lake, and I don't understand why all of a sudden that stopped. I mean, like I said, I'm more than willing to pay a fee for upkeep on the lake, and I'm sure other property owners in the area would be willing to do the same, you know. It's a beautiful lake. It's a great place to go. Kids go down there, float around on the dock and have fun and swim and all that stuff, and, you know, it's a good opportunity and a place for people to, you know, go and visit. And it's a beautiful spot, and I hate to see it go by the wayside. Sorry, I mean, that's just the way I feel. Thank you.
My name is Nanad Popovich. I live on Hidden Lake, just around the corner from the lake, a couple houses down. Use the lake quite often. I think at the last meeting we had, I made a joke that I had a blackberry pie sitting on my counter from the lake at the time, so it's something that my family uses. I know a lot of other individuals nearby. I go down the lake, there's lots of kids fishing down there. It's a nice spot. I do know this gentleman, other folk have taken care of it down there. I'm a little concerned about the future of Hidden Lake. Looking at the FCLOA timeline, that's the other Four Corners Association that owns Araby. Looking through their timeline, there's some questions, at least that I have, and looking at the parcel transfers back and forth as to why that landowners association even got half the lake. I'm not sure why they did. They also got a second parcel that wasn't even associated with Araby Lake. I'm not sure why that happened. What's done is done, but it'd be curious to see who FCLOA might have some responsibility or figure out what happened back then. There's a lot that's unclear to a lot of people around as to why that transfer ever happened in the first place. And I think there's enough interest that people would like to take care of this lake and keep it for those around there to still enjoy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Osucha, and I actually live across from Lewis over there. I've been there since 1978, and growing up there, all the time down there. My kids use it now, and I have no problem helping maintenance down there, cleaning up. I do tree work and landscaping for a living. I've got lots of equipment. I don't have a tractor, but I've got lots of chainsaws and a lot of energy where I could definitely be a part of keeping the maintenance up on that place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Okay, we got a couple.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. My name is James Amick. I'm a longtime resident, 1978. I spent a lot of time at that lake when I was a kid. I loved it. And having that as, for my parents when they bought the place, it was highly rated for our surrounding property values. And some of the things that happened in '96 about the transfer to Four Corners, I know that there's a lot of speculation as to what happened there. But one thing that was clear was everybody around that area had a road association. There's East El Largo Road Association, West El Largo Road Association, and Hidden Lakes Road Association. None of them were ever contacted. And and considering we were paying fees on this and it had nothing to do with Araby, we have a hard time trying to figure out how the land was donated to Araby, because Four Corners is not Hidden Lakes, that's Araby. They paid their own fees for their own lake, and there's just a lot of confusion about that. And I attended the meeting at the lake in '96 after all the work was done. And I know even then there was questions about that. But anyway, some questions that I have are, I did see, some of this of where the money was, that you acquired because of the assessments on the properties. It went into maintenance fees. If you were drawing money all the way back from '68, I mean, this whole thing became about '68, how did EID acquire the land? The money that was being taken for the land for the maintenance fees, where exactly and year by year did that go? Because in '78, '79, and '80, I spent a lot of time at that lake. I never saw anybody working down there except me. And I did a little bit of brush trimming so I could mainly fish. But I spent tons of time down there swimming, fishing, loving it. Anyway, I'd really hate to see this place go to sale to a private party. I would like, and I'm sure some of you also would like to form some sort of a association to have them donate this land to us and give us an opportunity to turn it into what we want it to be, and which is clean it up, make it usable. I love, you're a landscaper, you're the man. Make it usable for us, make it a little park. And I'm sure it would draw more people to use it, because right now it's just out of control brushy. But that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Bradley, and I live on Hidden Lake. It's been in the family since the '70s, and it's a big part of the enjoyment of our property. We have a view of the lake, which is pretty obscured by all the overgrowth, but I understand that it's a liability both for EID and the Landowners Association, who owns the other half. It's also a liability for me because it is overgrown and we have concerns about fires, and that's why we've been down there, trying to remove some of the brush between our property and the lake. I shouldn't have to do that. It's not my property, but it is a liability for me as well as you. I'm really curious as to how the Four Corners ended up with only half the lake. Seems pretty fishy to me. And since they didn't pay anything for it, I think it would be a neighborly thing to do for them to, along with EID, bring that property into some kind of homeowners association for the people in the area. I watch people go down there almost every day and enjoy the lake when the weather's appropriate. Lots of people fishing, swimming. But you can't get all the way around the lake anymore. Well, until recently, EID came out and cut back the berry bushes. I'm assuming because you're looking at disposing of the property, and did some burn piles and things. But I just want to say that, you know, it does affect our liability. It affects the value of our home and whether we're to use the lake. Who knows what a property landowner would do with it, you know, once it's disposed of. It could affect the value of my property, and I definitely want to say in that, and an opportunity to work with my neighbors to keep it in the community. Thank you.
President Zini, if I could just, and I see we've got some other public comments, so I welcome those. But just this has come up a couple of times, and so I wanted the board to be aware that a couple of months ago now, the district did send out a vegetation management crew. We have a contract with CAL FIRE to utilize crew from Growlersburg to do work for us, and we do that throughout the district. We did have that crew go out and perform vegetation management at this parcel because, as I think a couple of folks have mentioned, EID still owns the property. We still have to take care of it, and we have a valid vegetation management ordinance that the county has enacted that we have to comply with. So I understand the speculation that, you know, we did this because we're trying to improve the property value. We did this because we have to, because we got to maintain our property, just like every other property owner has to maintain its property, and that's why we had that crew out there.
Mr. Griffin, do you mind terribly if I let a member of the public speak first on the phone because they've had their hand raised actually for quite some time? Thank you. If your phone number ends in 805, you have the floor. If you're calling from your phone and you're trying to unmute, do *6 on your phone and it will unmute you. *6. There you go. Can you please state your name for the record?
Were you asking to speak?
Yeah, I could hear you. Can you repeat your name and just speak up a little bit louder?
Okay, my name is Harleen Issa, and I own a home on West Del Largo Drive. I attended a meeting in probably '96 about the solution proposal from EID, and the discussion then was, I guess you could say, very much on the homeowners' side that they wanted EID to continue maintaining that lake for the community. Part of the problem we've had in the past is that there are three kind of entities that manage the activity of that community around the lake. One is, I guess, an HOA, then there's a community services area, and then there's a community service district. And there hasn't been any real coordination between those. And I think that it would take some effort to pull those three entities together to be able to form another group that might be responsible for maintaining the property. To lose the lake would be a big loss for the community, and we need to retain it. The process of doing that requires a lot of volunteer time, and I think that there are a number of people who would be willing to do that. But I thought the conclusion had been before that EID would continue maintaining the lake and collecting the fees, and I don't know why that stopped. I don't know what the history is on that. I know that that acreage that was transferred to Four Corners was not appropriate. The EID person at that time didn't know why that had happened, and I think that needs to be reversed because those people have no interest in that property whatsoever. And on a final note, I never received a notice that there was a community meeting in the mail or otherwise, and I'm on EID's website as well. So, I think that a proper hearing probably needs to be done with more community involvement, because I fear that a lot of people did not know that this proposal was in play. Thank you.
Are there any other members online? Anybody interested in speaking? Okay.
She has something, nope, she just accidentally raised her hand again.
Okay.
Steve Griffin, also a resident in the Improvement District, a little bit over 22 years or so. My wife and kids rode their horses down to the lake, swam in the lake. It's really a great asset for the community. So you can imagine our surprise when we learned that half of the lake is actually owned by another community, which is hard up for money and very excited to sell their parcel to, stuff their coffers. Speaking about the resolution itself, you'd mentioned that you needed to have it passed in order to dispose of the EID parcel. How does passing this resolution affect their ability to sell their parcel? Does it affect it in any way? It's one question I have. Like, if you pass it, does it make it easier for them to sell their parcel? Because if that's the case, I don't know why there needs to be a rush to pass it. It's been going on for years. Maybe you postpone it till we can iron out what we're going to do to try to unwind this thing, because it seems as though there was some sort of a mistake on EID's side to transfer this parcel to the Four Corners Landowners Association when Improvement District 32 was being dissolved. And it doesn't seem like, I think we need to get to the bottom of that if possible, do a little bit more digging as to why this parcel in another community is now owned by somebody else, and they're like, we don't want it, let's sell it, we need the money. It would be a real hardship for our community. I think it affects our property values, because people come by and they look at properties and they're like, wow, you got a lake we can go fish in, kayak on, paddle around on, that sort of thing. So, so you don't need to answer that now, but please consider that if passing this resolution makes it even easier for them to sell the parcel, we would not be in favor of passing the resolution. We're trying, a lot of us have been talking, we're trying to develop and we haven't had much time since we've learned about this, and it takes time for community action. We're trying to basically mirror a landowners association, so we have an entity that the EID parcel could come to, and somehow, however it can be acquired, hopefully with EID's assistance, to unwind that transfer. Maybe there's some sort of contractual thing that it just recently became known that was a mistake. I understand that's an avenue, a mutual mistake of fact or something like that. Not that we want to reel in attorneys on this thing, but we're hoping that EID with their attorneys, they can look at things. I think Four Corners has admitted they didn't even know they owned the parcel until recently. It's in their own documents they sent out to their staff that were their members that, hey, we just learned we got this 5-acre parcel. So let's, sell it, and because they're hard up for money, and I can't blame them for that. Money has a strong pull, but it's dividing the community out there, because it's like, hey, what if the shoe was on the other foot? What if you just learned that we own half of Lake Arrowby or your parcel, and we just want to sell it because we could use the money over here. It's about a good country living. A lot of our kids, and now hopefully our grandkids, could still have that lake, but it's really looking like it could go private, and it'd be a big loss for the community. So, basically, we appeal to the board's sense of fairness, and likewise to the Four Corners Landowners Association, and its members, to try to unwind this thing. Help us get that parcel back. We got a lot of people now that are interested in developing a landowners association. There's 2 zones of benefit. I know people call them road associations and homeowners, but there's a Hidden Lake zone of benefit. There's a East El Largo zone of benefit. Both those parcels are in those zones of benefits. We've talked to the county, the zone of benefit administrator, Liz Hess, and she said that some zones of benefits, that wetlands management, landscape can be part of their zones of benefit duties. Actually, in the Hidden Lake zone of benefit, Hidden Lake Court goes, at least per the maps, all the way across the dam. So maintaining along there could be part of the scope. I know money has come up, if people get
behind it enough. We've had a lot of people say they're willing to spend a little bit more. You can slightly increase assessments for those zones of benefits. So we would have the resources. We don't have to maintain ourselves, but you can do volunteer work. We could go that route first, but we'd like to try to have the time to organize, and maybe even with EID's assistance, organize a landowners association, or if we got to get somebody else to help us to do that, we'll get a Hidden Lake Landowners Association, like Four Corners Landowner Association, so we can receive the parcels. I think you mentioned EID might be willing to donate it, if they had somebody to donate it to.
Just to clarify.
I don't know. No, I mean, I know you're not recommending that, but
I didn't make any commitments at that meeting.
That's right.
I referred to the action that was taken in 1996, but I told the
I hear
community
you.
then, and I'll tell you again now,
Yeah.
that decision has to be made by the board. And
Sure. But it has happened in the past, and maybe it could happen in the future. But just please help us to try to get our lake back. There's already been some real estate flyers from the Four Corners people, or some, print-ups that we've seen that, hey, they could use the dough, but it's, at our detriment. And so please, we appeal to your sense of fairness to help us retain this lake. Thanks.
President Enzini, if I could just, and Mr. Griffin, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I do want to respond to his question. Mr. Griffin asked a question about what effect would dissolution of ID 34M have on the ability of Four Corners Landowner Association to transfer its property? So let me see if I can address that. The short answer is not much. Although, because of course, Four Corners Landowner Association is controlled by a board of directors of its own. They make decisions independently from EID, except to the extent that that parcel, the parcel owned by Four Corners Landowner Association, is within ID 34M. And so when currently, if you were to do a title report on that particular parcel, you would find that that parcel is subject to ID 34M and any potential assessments made under ID 34M by EID. Of course, we're not making those, but you would find that in the title report. If once dissolved, the EID would record its notice of dissolution, the resolution that we've proposed and presented to the board today, and we would record that document so that at some point in the future, I don't know how long it takes the recorder's office to do their work, but eventually, if you will not see ID 34M on the title report for that parcel or any of your parcels. I'm sorry, any of the parcels located within ID 34M once the record of the notice of dissolution has been recorded.
So I would like to, I will only entertain one more, and you've already spoken, but if it's a real brief question.
A real brief addition to what he was talking about. I am a member of the committee, the road committee, for the zone of benefit for Hidden Lake. And we have a committee, and we barely have enough funds to do road work, much less take on something else. So unless money is acquired somehow, there's no way the road committee can do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So any other?
President Enzini?
Yes. Yes, Director Day.
Yeah, I have a few questions and then some comments. Has anybody from EID talked to representatives of Four Corners, and have we gotten any indication? I do think it sounds very unfortunate that the other half of the lake got transferred to them, and they have very little to do with it. But have we had any communication with Four Corners and with their intentions? And then I have some other questions.
Yes, Director Day, to answer your question specifically, we have been in contact with some of the members of the board of directors for Four Corners Landowner Association. They may well be in attendance today virtually. Mr. Barrow, who's on the board, Mike Barrow, as well as Janet Barbieri, who's, I think, the board president at the time for Four Corners. They both attended the community meeting that we held in July on this topic, and they also provided their own comments and insights at that. So I won't speak for them, but to answer your questions, yes, we have been in contact with them.
I would if they're listening in or if we have future contact with them, I would encourage them to try to work with their neighbors to try to figure out a resolution so that the people around the two lakes can enjoy them and not exploit what appears to be an accident for gain. But speaking of that, we always have to look at are either of the properties buildable, and are either properties, do they have direct public access versus just neighbors that are around it?
Was that a question, Director Day?
Yes. Yes.
Are either of the parcels buildable? Yes, I believe they probably are. They're zoned, if I recall correctly, residential 5 acres, so they are developable as far as I know. There is direct public access from the parcel owned by Four Corners, and that access has provided and continues to provide the community with access to the lake facility itself. There's a driveway, a gate. I think that answered your question.
Well, then, if for the parcel we own, and I'm not indicating my indication or my intent that this would be a good thing, but if we went to go sell it, would anybody have access? If a new buyer bought it to build a home on it, would they have even access? Is there road access, that sort of thing? I'm just curious.
There is no road access to the EID parcel, separate and apart from the road access on the Four Corners parcel.
So that would make it very difficult then for someone to try to develop it. I have some concerns. I'm sympathetic to the folks around there. Sounds like they're starting to talk to each other. I would like to withdraw my second and move that we continue this for 6 months to try to give the folks around there time to organize, to see if they can come up with an association. Much easier said than done. And 6 months will go by quickly, but I think it's been this long. I think we can give them some time to try to organize that and to try to reach out and communicate with the Four Corners folks. And if EID can help facilitate that communication so that maybe they can work out something that is beneficial for everybody. So again, I withdraw my second and move that we continue this for 6 months.
Okay.
I'll second the revised motion by Director.
It's a new motion.
It would have to be a new motion.
Yeah, it's a new motion.
I absolutely concur with that. My intent to move it was to get the discussion going and put it on a public forum.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I firmly agree with Director Day's approach that we continue with our staff working, maybe come to some resolution.
Okay, for the record, both directors.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Both directors, Osborne and Day, withdrew their motion, first and second of option 1. There is now motion, option 2, take other action as directed by the board and continue this item for 6 months. Moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. For the record, I do have a Mike Barrow and a Janet Barberi logged in, but that doesn't mean that's actually them. But I do have a hand raised by, I'm going to call her Janet because I don't want to butcher her last name. So I'll go ahead and allow her to speak.
There we go. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Yeah, this is Janet Barbieri. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak briefly. I am the current president for the Four Corners Landowners Association, and I just thought it would be helpful, since I am present, to just say hello. We are listening. We did, as was mentioned, we did participate in the public meeting back in July. You know, someone asked about our intentions. Our intention at this point in time is kind of fact-finding. We're taking a wait-and-see approach. Our ownership of that parcel was news to this board, and so we've been doing our very best to sort of figure out what's what. And you know, that's basically all I can say right now. We do have a membership, we have a board, and this board feels it's incumbent on us to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of our members and our assets. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what the lay of the land is, and then figure out sort of what the paths forward are. So I would also say that, you know, we've been very open about those intentions and about our concern about our own liability and our own assets. I was at that meeting and provided my email address. I provided my own personal cell phone number. Those are still available in the public record. If people wanted to reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk with anyone who has any questions about the SCLOA and how we operate. But I also just wanted to make clear that, you know, it's also doesn't work for me personally, and I'm not speaking for the board here, to have our motivations impugned. We have been very open in trying to, you know, work together, and we're not hiding anything. We do own the parcel, however, and we do have liability, and we do have obligations and a fiduciary responsibility to our members. So we take that very seriously, and that's how we will move forward. So that's all I wanted to say, and just wanted to let you know I was here. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another person have their hand raised?
No, it does not appear. I just want to go over one more time. If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. However, some people still get a little confused. So if you're participating by telephone, you do *9, and that will raise your hand, and *6 will mute and unmute. So if you're participating by phone and you would like to speak during this period or any other, you just press that *9 on your telephone. It'll raise the hand on this end, and then once we allow you to speak, you will do *6, and that will mute and unmute you. It does not appear there are any additional members online that are wishing to speak on this item, our public hearing number 10. Are there any additional members of the public wishing to speak here in the audience on public hearing item number 10? Consider adopting a resolution dissolving Improvement District 34M. Okay, if you could come back to the microphone and state your name. This is your last little.
Steve Griffin, Hidden Lake area. If Four Corners is concerned about their present liability, wouldn't it be possible for them to just transfer the property back to EID, who could receive it? Now you'd have both parcels, and then you could work on, you know, that would unwind the mistake, and then you could work on then disposing of the two properties, whether to a newly formed Hidden Lake Landowners Association or some other entity, and Four Corners would be free of their liability of owning that parcel. I also understand there was some information about what had been collected over the time through the Improvement District and what had been spent, and I know maybe some of the accounting got lost through changes in tracking work orders and stuff, but it did appear as though there were $32,000 that, you know, it's suspected that it was all spent, but maybe it was rolled into another pocket of, you know, bucket of money. You know, maybe offering, if that is the case, you know, there was a Freedom of Information request for the accounting of that Improvement District, maybe offering them the $30-something thousand for their troubles or something would be adequate for them. I'm sure that would be a lot of money for them, and that might help unwind this whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on a minute. All right.
Just a comment before we vote.
And I will have a comment too. So.
You know, none of us really know the details of how this evolved. I suspect there was an error when we dissolved 32M, and this parcel got, through a typo or whatever, got transferred in error, which makes me wonder if we might be able to resolve that by saying this was a windfall through an administrative error, and we need to bring it back to EID. And I think if I could paint a picture of success for this issue, it would be consolidate those two parcels into one, assist the homeowners in forming HOA, POA, an association, and then deed the land through, give them the opportunity to purchase perhaps for a minimal amount the property, and then resolve the issue that would dissolve our liability, responsibility. It would give the homeowners ownership and control of their property. So that's kind of my view of how we should proceed. The stickler, of course, is the issue with the Four Corners, who had a windfall through an administrative error, I believe, and we should resolve that.
Good point. Just before we go to vote, it's interesting always when it comes up with surplus properties. And one of the purviews of public agencies is to look at property that doesn't gain them any benefit, and it's going out the pocket to pay for an upkeep. I think it's ironical, well, it's not ironical. It's interesting as you look at the timeline from 1978 down to where EID is today, that I just want to identify that timeline that, in 1972, 1974 is when those two 5-acre parcels. So we are kicking that bucket down the road, onward and onward. And in 96, it was brought forward to dissolve it. They took no action. They kicked it down the road. And then in 2000, again, to reconsider, it kicked it down the road. And then 2011, it was finally declared as a surplus property. So a lot of things have happened. No management can take privy of this issue. It just is something that doesn't need to be kicked down the road anymore. So I would really love to see these two agencies work together, or the two groups work together and come up with a plan so 6 months from now we can finally dissolve this property, relieve our EID ratepayers who don't get a benefit of this at all because you don't provide water into our system, and to resolve that problem. So, that's my comment on this. Is always fascinating, the history of property being transferred from here to here to here. But the other part is those who have been longtime property owners, I feel your emotions. I feel those memories are really important to you. So here's an opportunity to make it happen. And I wish you luck. So thank you for bringing this forward. All right. Is the board ready to vote?
Public hearing item number 10. The motion is option 2, take other action as directed by the board and continue this item for 6 months. Motion by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. How do you vote, Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to our information items. You can stay and hear the rest of our story, or you can leave right now. And can I declare a 5-minute recess? Thanks.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess. We will just pause, and we will not return prior to 10:40. Since we have a quorum, I think that we can go forward with Dan's. Oh, there he is.
It's making money right now, actually. So. Okay, President Zini, members of the board, good morning. Just members of the public, Dan Corcoran, Operations Director. This morning, I'm actually going to do official handing of the baton. And so as part of the August 8th presentation that the general manager did, we talked in the key performance indicators, one of those was succession planning, and it's talked to more intention in more detail in the agenda items. So, so we're responding to evolving, environmental regulatory concerns and just really trying to build the knowledge base of additional staff. So at this point forward, a lot of these regular updates will actually be done by a new position the district created in district hydrologist. So I'm going to ask Jordan Baxter to step up. Jordan is new to the position, but not new to the district, and has lived his whole life even playing around the watershed before he worked in it. So Jordan's now going to be giving you today's presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, Dan. Good morning, members of the board, members of the public. My name is Jordan Baxter, as Dan said, and I'll be providing the water supply update. This first slide here is a photo of the main dam at Lake Aloha. So this is looking the downstream side of the dam. And this was taken last month while we were doing dam inspections, which happens annually with Department of Safety of Dams on the state side, and then the Federal Energy Regulation Committee on the federal side. So I took this photo. One thing to note, the board was briefed in, I think it was November of 2020, on work that was done to patch some of the leaks, especially where the dam meets the bedrock in the groin area. And you notice here there's really very minimal water coming out. So the patchwork did what it was supposed to do, and the regulators were very impressed with the state of the dam.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Did you hike up or did you take the helicopter?
This was a hike trip.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Good on
We
you.
did cheat a little bit. We took a boat across the Echo Lakes, but it was a hike trip. Next slide, please. Just a little summary of what we'll be talking about today. All of the Project 184 reservoirs did fill. We're now in the seasonal drawdown period. Jenkinson Lake end of season carryover storage continues to be higher than what was initially projected. A lot of this is due to customer conservation as well as inflow at Camp Creek Tunnel. State Water Resources Control Board continues to have weekly updates on which of our water rights are or are not curtailed. So we get updates weekly. Overall, really minimal impact to district operations, which we'll talk about later. Lastly, the district continues to remain well-positioned to meet our 2022 customer demand, and we are prepared in the event that we stay in a dry spell that we'll be able to be okay water supply-wise. Next slide, please. So this was updated this morning. I updated it with the midnight storage for all of the reservoirs relevant to the district's operations. So we'll start with Caples Lake. Caples Lake is 67% full. Silver Lake, just over half full, 50% full. Echo Lake, drafting of that started just after Labor Day, and we're getting towards the end of that draft, so we're at about 18%. Lake Aloha, most of that water has been used downstream, so we're only at 6% on our water right there. Jenkinson Lake, 64% full. Folsom Reservoir, down to 37%, almost 36% as of midnight last night. And then Weber Reservoir is beginning to decline. We're at 67%. Next slide, please. So talking reservoir management, as I said, all the project reservoirs filled by June, some earlier this year just because we had a lot of carryover storage. And then Jenkinson Lake, the carryover projections were about 2,000 acre feet less than what we think we're going to end up with. So that's a great problem to have. As of the creation of this, 2 to 3 cubic feet per second were coming through Camp Creek Tunnel. However, after the most recent rainstorm, we're seeing close to 5 or 6 CFS come through Camp Creek Tunnel currently. So only minimum releases were made throughout the entire summer from Weber Reservoir, which in the summertime is just over 1 CFS. We did get permission last Friday, the 23rd of September, to begin the Weber transfer. So water is coming out of Weber about 12 to 14 CFS right now. Lastly, a little bit different than typical operations. Usually Silver Lake is drafted beginning the 16th of September. However, the California Independent System Operator announced when we had the big heat wave that, hey, there's a chance that we're just not going to be able to meet demand. So if you are an energy producer, please give us everything you can. So what we did is we opened up Silver a little bit early. We drafted from the 6th to the 9th, and we're able to up the generation at the El Dorado Powerhouse. And my power didn't go out, so hopefully we did a little bit good there. Next slide.
Mr. Baxter, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I was one of the old dogs around here, during the agreement, we made it September 15th before we would start drawing in Amador. Did we have to notify Amador County to say, hey, we got to start drawing water down, or were we able to just do it unilaterally?
Defer to Mr. Corcoran on that one.
I'm not as old enough a dog, but I'm old enough to know that our existing license agreements, including with Amador County, specifically contemplated that provision of the FERC license. It's a not often used provision, but that's one that's kind of
okay.
So it didn't require a separate notification.
Yeah, okay.
Just so you know, even though we did exercise for those few days, we're still going to meet all of the league requirements, which is obviously Amador County's primary interest, the League to Save Sierra Lakes agreement. So we're still going to meet all of those requirements.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so this slide may look familiar. In the background, this is for Jenkinson Lake storage over the history of the reservoir operation. In the background, kind of faded out, is kind of the typical shape of how much storage is in the reservoir. You can see in red 2022, and then some of the more bold lines below with called out dates. Those are situations where the lake was drawn down a little bit lower than normal, just for comparison. You can see that the projection starts where that dashed line on the red. Thank you for the point there. That's what we're projecting for the rest of the month. Keep in mind and look at the shape of some of the other years. Usually around that November, December timeframe, we start to get some inflow. So that inflow will increase the storage. So we've projected really minimal inflow to be conservative, but we are expecting or hoping that we kind of turn the corner and stop losing ground come November. And then in terms of Folsom reservoir operations, Folsom did get to 90% capacity in early June. If you spend any time around Folsom, which my family and we do, you've noticed the last few months that it's really dropped quickly. So it went from 90%, and today it's about 36, 37%. Anticipating at the end of the week, September 30th midnight, will be around 35%. The reason for this sharp decline is really a disproportionate reliance on that water coming out of Folsom to meet delta outflow requirements. So they're having to get water out of there to meet those requirements in the delta. Because the lake is drawn down low, the staff are planning to operate in a potentially low reservoir scenario. All this being said, we have and we continue to plan to only use local supplies provided by permit 21112. Next slide, please. So this is graphically looking at Folsom Lake Reservoir. I think this was put together last Monday, if I believe. But starting out, the green thin line at the bottom, that's last year, 2021. You can see this, we really just did not get much of an inflow at all, and it was 5 mile per hour most of the year. Looking at the top, and that was a critically dry year. Looking at the top, the red line, that was 2018, which is a below normal year. Got almost full, and then a typical drawdown pattern. Thin blue line, that's 2020, which was a dry year. There's quite a bit of hydrologic similarity to this year in 2020, so not surprising that the shape is similar. And then the dark blue line, that is this year. We've lost about 17,000 acre feet to that 375,000 acre foot since this was created, but we still continue to drop fairly quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of EID demand trends, I think the story really in this summer has been conservation on the part of our customers. We really just haven't had as high of demand as we had in more recent years. So if we're going to compare that numbers-wise, in the month of August, this was our lowest August since 2015, which I think is pretty impressive. Comparing to more recent years, 2021 and 2020, 11% less than those years in August. And then going back to 2013, which was more the beginning of that 2012 to 2016 drought, we're looking at 14% less demand than August of 2013. Moving into this month and kind of just projecting out the rest of the month, these last few days, in terms of September, we're on track to be 6% less than 2021 and 7% less than 2020. So overall, late summer and fall demand projections have decreased, and that's really due to the customer conservation. And like we talked about before, the Jenkinson Lake carryover storage is anticipated to be closer to 26,000 acre feet, which is about 2,000 acre feet higher than we were expecting to be. All right, now looking at this on a chart here, this is looking at district-wide demand in 2020, 2021, and then this year, 2022. This is on a monthly time step, starting in January, ending in December, so on the fiscal year, or the calendar year, I should say, excuse me. So we'll start with the yellow line. The yellow line is 2020, and you can see that the green dashed line is the same shape of it, but just a little bit less amplitude. That's 15% conservation compared to 2020. And so 2020, pretty decent demand, especially in the June, July, August timeframe. And then going to 2021, this is when we saw extremely high demand throughout the district. You can see starting in April, May that really just quite a bit higher than these other comparative years. And then when we look at this year, which is in red, we started that January to March timeframe. We did have pretty high demand, although once things started to warm up, we kind of just shrunk back down, and we're a lot closer to that 15% conservation goal, which is great to see, and we've continued that and are hoping to continue that for the rest of the year. All right, so a little bit of discussion on the water right curtailments. So the district has been subject to water right curtailments for the last couple months. As I said earlier, they update this on a weekly basis, so staff continues to check to make sure that we are in compliance with all the curtailments. Luckily, though, in terms of the water supply, all those curtailments came after the filling of our reservoirs. So what that means is that we can beneficially use the water that's already been put into storage, and as such, we really have had minimal impact on our water supply. One impact that is worth noting is we did have to stop diversions on the North Fork Cosumnes River in early September. So that water would be diverted into the Crawford Ditch, and that impacted 9 downstream customers. So their irrigation season ended a little bit early this year.
I have a question, and this is for Jim. Actually for Jenny Downey's shop, but did we converse with those people by letter or email or something that this was a state mandate, not an EID mandate, that was completely out of our control to do this? Did we do that?
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Oh, you're beating me to it, thank you. Okay, so for prevailing weather patterns, August was great. My wife does not like the heat, and she was just saying how great August was. It was pretty mild. We got a little bit of rain here and there, but nothing really substantial. And then September rolled around, and as we know, it got very, very hot, breaking records in Sacramento. And unfortunately, it led to really poor conditions for a fire to get pretty big. So that was scary for a while in early September. Not mentioned here is the or I should say well-received storms that came through last week. Provided a decent amount of rain, especially in that band kind of between 4,000 feet and up to the Sierra Crest. We saw decent amounts of rain, and that helped with the mosquito fire containment percentage as well. And then moving down to the next point here, so NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, their Climate Prediction Center puts out a forecast. The most recent forecast came out September 8th, and just the cliff notes on that was through 2022, we can expect kind of the more dry that we have been having, which would be more of a La Nina situation. But the models are suggesting that as we continue to move into 2023, there's more of a chance of things being more neutral. So that neutral is more typical precipitation patterns. Next slide, please. And just speaking to that point, so in the Climate Prediction Center's forecast, they put out these ENSO models. So it's El Nino, gosh, I'm blanking right now. Southern Oscillation, thank you. El Nino Southern Oscillation predictions. So these are a bunch of models, and these are very busy, and I understand that. So looking to the left, that's what came out in their previous edition that Dan spoke to last month. And then on the right, this is the most recent that was included in the September forecast. Put simply, so the y-axis is the sea surface temperature anomaly, so how far away are you from normal? If you're above the middle black line at 0.0, that's indicating warmer temperatures, which equals El Nino, which in turn is usually more precipitation for our area. Below 0.0, less than normal sea surface temperatures, La Nina, typically a little bit drier. So through the rest of this year, we're looking still in the La Nina pattern, but you can see the models start to kind of converge closer to a normal pattern beginning in the January to May timeframe. Next slide, please. Next, Audiencedale trends. So as presented to the board in previous board meetings, the water right for Audiencedale was curtailed in June 2022. So the water supply for Audiencedale is the Middle Fork Cosumnes River. It's the only water source. So it was important that the district worked with the State Water Resources Control Board to make sure we could continue those diversions. And that was done. So we let a little bit extra water out of Jenkinson Lake, which allows us to continue to divert there. Staff continue to monitor the flow rate upstream of this diversion, as well as the temperature. And I've been making a lot of those measurements. And what I've noticed is just a really slow, which is good, we like to see that, a very slow decline in the river flow. In about the second week of September, it really started to level out right around 5 CFS, which is a good thing to see from a scientific standpoint. But I'll pivot to Patrick Wilson, who manages the water treatment plant there at Audiencedale.
Good morning, board. Patrick Wilson, drinking water manager. So as Jordan was alluding to, we've actually seen a slow decline in Audiencedale, much slower than we had originally anticipated from my prior presentation. One benefit to that has been there's been, I wouldn't say an abundance of water, but there's been treatable water there. As of last Friday, we've had about 6.5 CFS. That was still actually going down the river, where our modeling prior to that was indicating that we'd be down in the 2s to 3s CFS. Historically, from that time frame, as that river begins to tail off, we start to have water treatment issues from the water quality side of things. To date, in fact, with that last storm, it's really cleaned up a lot of that watershed, and as of Friday, that water is at least aesthetically is pristine. Obviously, every Wednesday we're taking raw water samples from that river to help us indicate at the treatment facility any precursors that we might see for trouble ahead. To date, they've actually been flattening out, and especially with that last storm, we've seen a drop in the total coliform out there, stayed around the 3,000 to 5,000 range, somewhere in that ballpark. Treatable history pass has been around 10 to 12,000. When the count gets that high, we have trouble treating it. And that's typically when the water quality also aesthetically turns to kind of a tea color. But so far, so good, and haven't had to truck water yet. And hopefully not planning to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I just didn't want to say that last bullet. Thank you. So this is just looking at historical hauling of water to Audiencedale. As Patrick said, hopefully this isn't an issue. But just graphically, squiggly lines, that is the measured flow rate upstream. This is a state gauging site. So looking at the green line, that's 2021. Very top orange, that's 2014. The gray line, 2015. And then this year is in blue. So no hauling yet, just a comparative. And you can see the dates in the top right of that graph as to when we were hauling. And those darker bolded lines underneath it corresponds with the x-axis on the date. So you just can get an idea of when we were hauling relative to the hydrology. Next slide. So beginning in June, knowing that we just didn't have a lot of snowpack and we were concerned that we might be in a hauling situation, I was asked by Patrick and his predecessor to start making measurements. So beginning in June 23rd, measured 27 CFS, and you can see that line's just steadily declined. The last measurement I made was September 13th. I measured just over 5 CFS. I was out last Friday, but Patrick was able to get out with his staff and make a measurement. He measured 6.5 CFS on the 23rd. So that storm has actually bumped it up, and hopefully we can continue that trend and get some more storms.
What's the minimum before we have to shut down the treatment plant? In terms of quantity, not quality.
Yeah, so actually, history past, we've actually run it to the point of being subterranean back in 2014. So the water actually was going underneath the dam. We could no longer physically divert. So that is an option. That being said, it's more the quality that's going to drive where we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Last slide here. So Drought Outreach, the district continues to try to inform our customers about the drought that we are facing. And so some of the avenues that information is shared is through the district's bi-monthly waterfront newsletter, as well as information placed in the local newspaper. The most recent waterfront was the September-October 2022 edition. In this waterfront, there was discussion of water awareness during wildfire, and then in the general manager column, there was also discussion of carryover storage and how the district is meeting Governor Newsom's mandate to conserve water. Lastly, so the district has done this in the past, it continues to. We got to do this actually last week to remind customers, hey, turn off your irrigation. It's easy to forget all those timers. Turn off your irrigation during rain events and keep it off for 48 hours. The avenues that this is shared is through the website, Facebook, and Nextdoor. I'm not a Nextdoor user, my wife is, and she reminded me to turn off my irrigation onto the garden. So you're getting to people.
You need a Ratio electronic system, and I love it.
Yes, I do it manually just for that reason, and it's just more fun.
Yeah, it
So,
automatically turns
yeah.
it off when it rains.
But I did get the reminder, so. Any questions from the board or the public?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A question from Director Day? Nope.
No, not a question, just a compliment to Jordan and his presentation. Good job.
Good job. Good. All right. Next item. Welcome to the podium, Ms. Dawson.
All right, good morning, President Anzini and members of the board. Elizabeth Dawson, Engineering Manager, and the information item I have for you today is to review our recently completed capital improvement plan construction projects. Next slide, please. So this project will go over those recently completed capital improvement plan projects, and will provide an update on construction expenditures and a key performance indicator associated with those projects. Next slide. So this is a map showing the 8 projects that we'll be discussing today. And I just wanted to let the board and the public that might be listening know that these are projects that have been completed or substantially completed since the last time I was before you giving this presentation. So that was earlier this year. So a substantially completed project means a facility that we have taken over operations, but the contractor might still be doing some minor work on those projects. Some of these projects span multiple years, and some of the projects have been completed recently. Next slide. So before I go into each one of these slides and discuss what these projects are all about, I just wanted to highlight for you the consistency that's shown on each of these slides. For instance, the total authorized for construction for this particular project of $1.85 million is the total package that the board authorized for construction of this project. So it included the construction contract, associated contracts such as soils testing, stormwater management, capitalized labor, and project contingency. The second line there, the initial construction contract, is the actual construction contract that the board authorized for this project. The final contract amount includes any change orders that may have occurred throughout the course of that construction. And then the percent change shown here is the difference between those two numbers. We typically like to see this percent change number 10% or less. That's kind of the industry standard for percent changes on construction projects, and it varies depending upon the risk and complexity of those particular projects. And then also giving a little bit of background, there's 3 reasons for a change order to be initiated or occur. One is an unknown condition, which is typically these are conditions underground with unknown utilities or unknown soil conditions. Another is a issue with the design. It could be missing information, or they could have some wrong elements in the design. And the last one is an owner requested change to the construction. We will often use this mechanism to improve the operation and maintenance of projects or the safety of the project that we didn't consider during design of the project. So this particular project, the Audiencedale water intake, serves the community of
Pardon me.
Audiencedale. Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. This Director Day. If I have I'd like to make a suggestion on the, if you could put the slide back up, actually. I was looking at that. Could we, on future reports, include, I think because history can inform us and we can all learn from it, is where it says total authorized initial construction, so on. Can we, above that, include initial CIP estimate, final CIP estimate, and then add that, because then we kind of see where our estimates were, where they ended up, then where actual costs came in, and so on. I'd like to make that request and a suggestion. Does that make sense?
Isn't it actually on the chart? It's
no,
later.
actually, it's not included in the chart. We'll get to that slide towards the end
Okay,
of the presentation.
because I remember this being asked before, so, yeah.
Yeah, but I certainly
Yes.
could include that for future updates, Director Day. I think that's a great suggestion.
Right.
Thank you.
You bet. So starting off with the Audiencedale water treatment intake, this original construction that you see here, the photos down below, this intake was constructed in 1998. It had some issues with pump reliability. We couldn't get replacement parts. The pumps would lose prime, which is an issue for our operations staff because this is a satellite facility. The electrical equipment wasn't up to code. So this new project consisted of installing self-priming trash pumps, a sand separator, a transfer tank, and then booster pumps that would send that sand-free, debris-free water up to our water treatment plant for treatment and distribution to our Audiencedale customers. It also provided safe access for our staff. As you can see, this picture down below on the right-hand side was the old stairway access down to the intake pump station. We've now constructed the new stairway with landings. It also has a trolley cart that allows our staff to place pump equipment or tools in that trolley, so the trolley can actually take that heavy equipment up and down the staircase. And we received, just to let the board know, for that particular project, we received a Prop 84 grant of $160,000 to offset the cost of construction. So the next one is the upper main ditch pipeline. As the board is aware, we had an open channel, unlined channel that was 3 miles long that provided water from our 4-bay reservoir to our Reservoir 1 water treatment plant. This is a pretty important facility for us. And the water that was delivered was at times turbid. The operations staff reported spikes in E. coli that was coming into the plant. We had significant water losses through that 3-mile stretch of open ditch. So this project, the objectives of this project were to protect that source water quality, reduce those water losses, improve our operations and maintenance at our treatment plant, and eliminate the safety issues of continuing to maintain that open ditch. The water staff has told me that the turbidity has been reduced since this project has been online of the water that is delivered to Reservoir 1, and it's also a consistent level of turbidity, so it's much easier for them to treat that water when there's no fluctuations in turbidity coming into the plant. I would like to say, so about half of this pipeline was constructed in Blair Road, and there was a significant concern from us with the impact that this community was going to have during construction of this project. So we worked with Jesse and his team to really develop a multiple approach of outreach to the community, which consisted of a broadcast of letters to the community to inform them about this project. We had updated our project website that showed actually how the course of construction was moving forward. We had project signs, and we would hang door hangers on resident doorknobs to let them know when construction was actually going to be in front of their house, and they had a number to contact if they needed to. So Kaylee, the project manager, informed me that there was really very few issues and comments through the course of this construction. When they did arise, the team really was effective in pulling together and addressing those issues and mitigating those issues. So this project is nearly complete. We still have a few pavement items to wrap up. This final contract amount was forecasted to include that additional work, but I expect that when it is complete within the next few weeks, we won't see a % change greater than what's shown here. And we also received a $1 million grant from the USBR Water Smart program to offset the costs of this project. So the Dorado Valve, the Dorado Main number 2 air relief valve upgrade project really had two purposes. This is a main transmission artery for the district that starts at our Res 2 tanks in Camino and continues westerly until it transitions to the Gold Hill intertie. It serves an extensive portion of our customers throughout the district. It was constructed in the 1970s. The air valves associated with this pipeline were all original. They were past well beyond their useful life and needed to be replaced. And so this project replaced all those ARVs, which are a critical component for the safe operation of our transmission mains and pipelines. But in addition to that, if the board recalls, we had a few leaks on this pipeline started in 2019, and one which required emergency shutdown and repair of this line. So we really need to do a condition assessment with a camera insertion of this pipeline and other district transmission mains. This project allowed us to place a coupling within these structures that you see here that allow for a camera insertion, so we can actually go in and do a visual inspection of the lining on the interior of that pipe. That project is currently out to bid, and we'll be bringing that project before you for your consideration in the next month or so. So the Camino Intertie Pressure Reducing Station number 1, this pressure reducing station is located near our Reservoir 2 tank site. The Camino Intertie is an important sort of transmission pipeline, allows us to move water around the eastern end of the system between Res 1 and Res A. There was a bottleneck within this pressure reducing station because the original valves, when they failed, were replaced with smaller valves that didn't allow the design flow to go through those valves. So this project replaced those valves with the original size that needed to actually flow the design flow, which is 40 CFS through this pump station. This project also included upgrade of a pump, which is located just next to this pressure reducing station. So we replaced a motor, and we installed a variable frequency drive on that pump. And we also changed out the vault access to this pressure reducing station. It's kind of difficult to see in this picture here, but you can see sort of a small opening in the foreground of that picture. It's about a 3x4 opening. That's the original opening to this vault, and it's a pretty substantially sized vault. So there really wasn't good forethought when this was built to allow access to get in there and actually replace the parts that were contained within this vault. So part of this project, as you can see, the crane is installing that new sort of blue top vault access to that concrete slab that covers the top portion of that pressure reducing station. The district has about 250 pressure reducing stations throughout our distribution system. They're really critical, important infrastructure that we maintain and keep reliable for the safe operation of our system. And we have a programmatic CIP in our current CIP, which allows for, it has funding of 3.3 million, so we can continue to identify pressure reducing stations that have issues and refurbish them as needed. So the El Dorado Hills Water Treatment Plant Flow Meter Upgrade Project, at that water treatment plant, we have 3 flow meters. So we have one on the raw water inlet into the plant, and we have 2 on effluent pipes coming out of the plant. These flow meters were insertion type flow meters that were the effluent flow meters, I think, were installed in the 1990s. And the one on the raw water inlet was installed in 2010, but it had failed last year. The issue with these types of flow meters is they're not very accurate to begin with, and over usage and over time, they continue to lose their accuracy. And this is a huge issue for us for understanding how the water is moving around our system and how much water we're actually producing and treating at our water treatment plants. So this project removed those old flow meters, installed new full bore magnetic meters, which are much more accurate, and they have great longevity. They don't require as much maintenance as the previous flow meters require. This is the first time plant operations staff told me that their influent flows and their effluent flows actually were reading the same number once we completed this project. It also included upgrades to the vault systems that contain these flow meters as well. So as we continue on with projects, you'll see more installations of these accurate flow meters included in our projects. So the board's heard a lot about these flume projects.
Looks pretty.
Yes, it does. But for the benefit of the public maybe listening in, Flume 30 is part of our Project 184 33-mile delivery system that takes water from Kybers down to our forebay. It supplies about 1/3 of the district's consumptive supply and provides hydropower generation capabilities as well. Flume 30, before it was destroyed by the Caldor fire, was about 325 feet long. And it was originally designed to be a 2-phase project because we had to construct roads to this site. There was no construction access originally developed for Flume 30. So the original design had the concept schedule of constructing the roads in phase 1 and constructing the flume in phase 2, which would have happened this outage. But when the Caldor fire came through and destroyed Flume 30, that really completely changed everything, and we had to regroup, redesign the project, and get it constructed, both the roads and the 325 feet of wooden flume converted to concrete canal in a much shorter time frame. So the contractor was awarded this project about 2 weeks before the Caldor fire came through and burnt it down. So we worked with SRC and our design team to redesign this and get this project complete and online by May 5th of this year. There's still a few items remaining to do here on Flume 30, but we anticipate that this work will be done in the next few months during the fall outage. So similar with Flumes 4, 5, and 6, these were all wooden flume structures, and in total, they comprise 730 feet of wooden flume. Again, this project site didn't have roads constructed to it, so the board issued a time and materials contract to SRC, and we worked with our design engineer to design roadway for construction access to these project sites, and then also convert the flumes that burn to a open concrete canal for delivery of our water. And this project was put online the same time as Flume 30 on May 5th. So the Folsom Lake intake, this project the board awarded back in 2020, I believe it was. And a little bit of history here. So this intake is a critical component of our water supply. It's the only intake we have out of Folsom Lake, which provides water to our El Dorado Hills water treatment plant, which supplies water to the majority of our customers in El Dorado Hills. Originally, this intake had 3 pump sides that were called A side, B side, and C side. The A side was constructed in the late 1950s. The C side was a temporary facility that tends to be a permanent facility over time because we never got around to really, replacing it. The B side is still in operation today. And so we started working on this project back in the early 2000s. And the original concept, Director Day might remember this, was to have a vertical shaft with horizontal intakes extending out for that temperature control intake into the lake. When we costed that out in 2011, that cost at that time was $44 million. And when you project that to today's cost, it's close to 65 or even maybe 70 million. And it was just too expensive of a project to construct. So we regrouped on design. We found pumps that could be installed on an incline that wouldn't require a second boosting stage. And so that's the project that you see here today, is we eliminated the A-side and C-side pumps. We constructed this new A-side, which is a phasable project. So when the B-side pumps reach the end of their useful life, we can add additional casings and pump intakes to the structure that you see here. Anytime you do a project on a site that is in operations, it is incredibly challenging and risky and difficult. This is probably the most challenging project that I've seen in my career here at the district. It's an incredibly constrained site, as you can see. We had in-water marine work. That sub-consultant had extensive difficulties in drilling those piles for those casings. And we were doing this during COVID when we had some supply chain issues on this project. I put this picture of the conduit in here because a colleague once told me you can judge the complexity of a project by how much conduit is installed on the project. And I've never seen as much conduit on any of our projects than what is shown here. So I'm really happy to report that this project is operational. We brought it in with a percent change of less than 5%. So for something that is this risky and complex, that really says a lot about the design team and the contractor that we were working with. I will say too, on this project, we implemented a facilitated sort of collaboration during the height of construction with the contractor, our design team, and the district, and we would discuss issues and risks throughout that facilitated discussion, and then we would develop action plans and mitigation items that we need to do to make sure that we mitigated those risks through the course of construction. It was really beneficial, and it's a great model that we'll probably incorporate as we do other risky projects here at the district. And then
Did you have an outside facilitator?
we did, yeah. I'm missing on the name of the company at the moment, but we did. We had an outside facilitator that was very experienced in construction come in, and we held those facilitations here at the district. I'll end on, I wanted to remind those listening that we did receive $7 million from the United States Bureau of Reclamation through our cooperative agreement to help fund the construction of this project. There's a temperature control element of this project, so we have 3 separate intakes on those casings that can pull the warm water from Folsom Lake and reserve that cold water pool within the lake. And so that fund from USBR was to help offset that TCD component of this project. So this is a summary table of the projects that we presented and discussed today. The total authorized for construction column is on the far left. I will say that flumes 4, 5, and 6, that $19.7 million also includes the design costs for that project because that project wasn't designed when it burned down. It wasn't really even on our radar to do those projects. The remaining balance in those project funds will be transferred back to those appropriate funding sources where they came from. So in total, the initial construction contract award amount for those 8 projects is just over 74.8 million. And I put estimated in here because I did have to project forward on some of those projects that have a few elements left to wrap up. But that estimated final construction contract amount for those projects is about 76.7 million. So an overall percent change of 2.5% for those projects. I do want to just acknowledge and thank the engineering staff for their management and oversight of these projects. Not only are they, just great project managers during construction, they also manage these projects through design and work really well with our operations staff to make sure that we define the objectives that are needed to construct and that those designs are thorough. So when we get to construction, we're not having a lot of issues during construction. So,
Great. Thank you. Any board comments?
Just a question, are contractors complaining or having issues with delivery of equipment and supply or something? I know, talking to some other people in the community, they've had some real problems with delivery of necessary apparatus and supply.
that's a great question, Director Osborne. And we've been put on notice with several of our construction projects by the contractors that, look, we're having issues. There could be potential issues with material delivery on our projects. We were getting those notifications quite often during the height of COVID. I haven't seen them so much recently, but with those projects and the ones I've been discussing today, we've really been able to work with the contractor. If for the case of Folsom Lake, for instance, that project was completed quite a bit beyond what our original anticipated completion date was. The contractor was a great contractor and didn't issue any extended overhead charges to us for those delays. So there could, be some of those instances could arise if they're having difficulty securing materials. But we've really been able to work with the contractors on these projects, but it has extended those completion dates.
Thanks.
Okay. Director Day had a question.
Well, not a question, but a compliment, because I want to compliment Elizabeth and everybody on the Folsom intake facility. I remember when we visited that facility, how cramped it is, that tiny street that leads to it, and how cramped getting down to it is. And I think there were maybe a couple dozen of us down there, and we were bumping into each other. So compliments on doing that. And I had the same thought when I saw those conduits. That's pretty wild, but a good job to everybody on that. It's a hugely important facility. It's going to serve the people of El Dorado Hills for decades to come, and we're going to be getting water out of it for a long time, I hope, as long as Folsom Lake has some water. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Day. I really have to acknowledge John Money and the team at Carollo for managing that construction project through, the last 2.5 years.
Okay, and Director Dwyer.
Yes, I guess piling on to Director Day's comments, with compliments to you and your staff, managing these very, very complex projects with a few wild cards thrown in there, like the Caldor fire, the time crunch to get this done, to get the water flowing back to our customers. The complexity of these projects is kind of mind-boggling, really, but having done all that and coming in with your contract estimate and the actual contract cost within a couple percent is pretty amazing. I'd also like to comment on the budget or the original estimates for these projects was higher than what they actually came in at, which I think is a good thing. I think it's good to be very conservative and overestimate what's going to cost and then come in under. And then, like you said, we return those funds back to wherever they came from, whether it's bond issues or pay-go or whichever one. So outstanding job. I hope we can come up with as many challenges for you in the next year. Things like the Sly Park intertie, and you're already working on the Silver Lake Dam. So thank you very much to you and your staff.
Thank you, Director Dwyer. One of the things I wanted to mention, and I forgot to mention, You know, one of our principles within our group is to really work collaboratively with our contractors and to be fair. We are very thorough and tough when changes present themselves, and we have to look at change orders and negotiate those. But we are always fair with our contractors. It's important that we're an owner that contractors want to work for, because it increases competition on our bids, and it ultimately, hopefully, reduces bid prices and saves the district dollars. So that's one thing I just have to applaud my staff and operations staff, is we really collaborate through the course of these construction projects and have that atmosphere of let's work together and solve these issues and continue forward.
So my comment is, what you just said makes an apt way of how a team works together. And it is true. If everybody works together and has an agreement on what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be doing it, it becomes a very successful plan. And I think ideally, when you even see a 2% on $75 million, or even more than that was in that list, a 2% overrun, that is phenomenal, because I know that the typical is around 15%, and that is building houses or whatever, and that's always built into the cost. And having it 2% over all these huge projects is a significant thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next.
If any members of the public would like to speak on information item number 12, please follow the directions on page 2 of today's agenda.
Any members?
Does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on information item number 12.
Okay.
Good morning still. Mike Brink, Supervisor of Development Services here at the district. Here to provide an update on the Folsom Heights project, something that Director Day requested a few months ago. Next slide, please. Some previous board actions. Way back in '78, before George was here, the board adopted or approved the annexation of Folsom Heights into our service area. And in 2018, the board authorized a joint community facilities financing agreement with the city of Folsom to fund Folsom Heights, and that allows Folsom Heights project to use bond funds for certain public benefits. Next slide. Topics I'm going to talk about today include a little background on the annexation, project description, the status of the design, let's talk about water and sewer service, the current schedule, along with FCC's rates and our tax revenue. Next slide. The history about annexation, back in '77, a local developer applied to annex about 356 acres into our service area. About half those acreages were in El Dorado County, and the other half were just across the county line at Folsom Heights. And as I mentioned, the annexation of Folsom Heights was approved back in '78. Next slide. A description of the project. The city of Folsom approved the Folsom Plan, Area Specific Plan, back in 2011. I have an exhibit that will show that to you on the next slide. That plan allows for the construction of about 11,461 homes, which also include the Folsom Heights portion of that. Folsom Heights includes about 530 homes plus some commercial development, and that's 530 homes is less than 5% of all the stuff you see going on now. There's really a small portion of the overall project. And Elliott Homes, a local developer, has done a lot of work in the city of Folsom plus in El Dorado County. They purchased the project in 2019, and I believe Price Walker with Elliott Homes is listening today and can speak if you have any questions about that. Next slide. This is an exhibit of the Folsom Plan area. The upper black line is Highway 50 with a little V-notch. In the middle is the Bidwell exit. On the left, I believe that's Prairie City Road coming off Highway 50 down to White Rock Road, which is the white line at the bottom. El Dorado County line is the black line up in the upper right. And the Folsom Heights project you kind of see in red is the upper portion next to the county line. Next slide. Design status. For development services projects, we issue what we call a facility improvement letter, which was issued back in 2021. That establishes our ability to serve the project and defines what they need to do to get service. The next step in the project is a facility plan report. That's like a 10% level design, which sizes the pipes and the pumps to serve the project. And then following that, we accept improvement plans. And for this project, we have not yet seen improvement plans for the water and sewer facilities. However, the city of Folsom has approved grading plans, and the grading out there started about a couple months ago within the Folsom Heights limits. And once plans are submitted for the water and sewer infrastructure, they'll be reviewed both by the district and the city for joint approval prior to construction. Next slide.
I have a question. Are they going, you haven't seen it yet, but are we also having the recycled water?
EID, we are not.
Okay.
Within the city of Folsom limits, they are installing purple pipe,
Okay.
which I understand they hope to serve with groundwater pulled from Aerojet. Once they remediate the groundwater within Aerojet, talking to Marcus, the water director down there at the city of Folsom, they're hoping to eventually get water from that facility to charge their purple pipes within their limits of the project. But within Folsom Heights, there's no plans to serve recycled water.
Okay.
Mike, back on your previous slide on the planning steps, wasn't there a water supply plan required someplace in there?
This project was part of the urban water management plan.
Yeah.
And the facility improvement letter documents the kind of the meters we have available to serve the project, so show we have very sufficient water to serve it. I guess I think there was a, what they call it, a water supply assessment done for Folsom Heights. I forget the date of that, but it was looked at in detail.
Okay.
This is kind of a distorted view of the Folsom Heights project. Again, it's much longer than it looks like in this picture, but as of right now, Elliott Homes plans to construct it in 3 different phases, noted by the 1, 2, and 3. Again, Highway 50 is up to the upper top county line on the right, and White Rock Road down that kind of flag lot on the bottom. Kind of just the left of the number 3 up there, you can see those 2 circles. Those are the 2 existing water tanks you see off Highway 50, just to kind of get your bearings. Those are City of Folsom tanks, not EID tanks. And that road between the circles and 3 is a future Empire Ranch Road. At some phase in the project, there's going to be new off-ramp and overpass at Empire Ranch Road between Latrobe Road and Bidwell. So there'll be new overcrossing coming in the near future. Next slide. Moving on to water service and sewer service. Districts will provide water to all the 530 homes and the commercial lots within Folsom Heights. Related to sewer service, about 130 of the 530 lots would require new sewer lift stations to get that waste up to EID. The remainder can flow by gravity to EID. And to avoid the cost of constructing and maintaining those lift stations, the city and district have agreed that those parcels shall become City of Folsom sewer customers. And we're currently working on a memorandum of agreement between EID and the city. Improvements in construction cost. The sewer that will come to EID will gravity flow to the existing Stonebriar lift station within Eldora County. That lift station is at capacity, and Elliott Homes will be responsible for design and construction of capacity improvements at that lift station at their cost. And as with all developer projects, all costs associated with the project, including our staff time, new water and sewer pipes. In this case, we also need a water booster station, and the capacity improvements to Stonebriar lift station will be paid for in full by Elliott Homes. Next slide. Anticipated schedule. Elliott, as mentioned, plans to construct the project in 3 phases. As I mentioned, mass grading has started about a month ago. Construction of the new facilities, including water pipelines, sewer pipelines, a booster station, and upgrades to Stonebriar, are anticipated to start next year. As I think George mentioned, there is supply chain issues that could delay that, but they're hoping to start next year. And complete build out will take many years, depending upon the economy and supplies. Connection fees and rates. With the exception of those 130 lots that will be served by City of Folsom Sewer, all parcels will be district water and sewer customers and pay our current FCCs per parcel. The district has a one district water and sewer rate policy. There'll be no special rate class for the city of for Folsom Heights. We acknowledge that the district's water and sewer rates are higher than the city's, and we will require Elliott to disclose that to potential buyers.
Hope so. We're already starting to see things on the social media about this whole thing.
Yeah. So. Moving on tax revenue, district currently does not receive any property tax allocation associated with the Folsom Heights parcels in Sacramento County. The district has contacted Sacramento County Auditor and Assessor's Office to gain more information about this. We'll report back when we have more information. However, the district does benefit significantly by serving customers within Sacramento County because doing so qualifies the district as a multi-county special district that's exempt from property tax shifting requirements associated with Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. So basically, the state can't come grab our tax money because we're a multi-tax or multi-county special district. That's what I have for you today. This is an information item only, so open any questions.
Any questions from
Yes.
people online? Oh, Director Day.
Yeah. Oh, if I may. Yeah. This is Director Day. Mike, good presentation. Very, very good information. I appreciate it. Lori, you're going to want to save this because you're going to get questions from folks there. I would encourage both the ID and the developer to take the historical information that's contained in this and kind of summarize it and have it ready to give to people and share with customers or potential customers buying there, because I think it will help explain how this all came about rather than people getting misinformation about stuff. So good job. Excellent.
Thank you, Director Day. Again, it would be nice to have a little postcard or something I can carry in my hand, because these questions keep popping up anytime I'm in a social event. Thank you. Very well done. Question.
Yeah, I think 500, that's about 1,000 acre feet to serve the 500 and some homes.
That's a good one.
Yeah, every 3 homes would be 100,000 acre foot per about 3 homes. So it'd be, quick math, 200 acre feet or so.
That doesn't sound right.
No, it is about a half acre foot and less per home, EDU. So yeah, about 250
acre feet?
Acre feet.
About 200 acre feet or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So not a lot.
Instead of doubling, I should have halved it. So yeah, thanks. So really, that's well within our current water supply and authorization. The challenge I see for us is, like Director Anzini said, and it's going to be a real challenge for Jesse and his crew, because we're already getting a lot of feedback. Why are you building all those houses in Folsom when we don't have water for our own customers? So it's going to be an education thing that says, yes, we do have enough water for our customers, our existing customers, and this is only a small portion of what you see when you go by Costco and what's going on over there. And the challenge will be, how do we communicate that? And it's the same as, how do we communicate that we're selling our available water to Westlands while we're asking people to conserve and reduce their consumption? So that's going to be a real challenge for not only our PR people, but for all of us. So how do we communicate that?
That's a fabulous question. I'm Jesse Sach, your communications manager. We're going to start with, we've previously put an article in the waterfront. We're going to update that, and that'll form our push through all of our social media channels. We'll continually create the types of easily digestible information packets that we can provide to you and the community at large, and also respond to them on those social channels as it comes up. You're absolutely right. It's a complication, but it's certainly something we can meet.
One of the key points to this multi-county thing is, over the years, we have saved an extraordinary amount of money because we did not have to transfer money to the state because of this Prop 8 exclusion. And I don't know what the amount is, but it's a massive amount of money. And that I've had people query me, and some very vociferous about why we're doing this. And when I explain to them that this saves the district and the ratepayers a lot of money, oh, well, that's not so bad.
So there's another point of this that people need to realize, that this was all created in 1978, right?
Yep.
In 1978. And LAFCO and the state had a lot to do with apportioning these areas. And we, as a utility, are required and mandated to service those boundary lines. And to me, that's an argument that you cannot pull out of because we are mandated to do that. And yes, a good example is by being held or handcuffed to this, we benefit with the exclusionary part of making sure that our revenue stays with us. So, okay, great.
Yeah, and I would just, that the 200 acre feet, I think, is a really important number for Jesse to share, for the board, for all of us to share with the people that inquire about this, and compare that 200 acre feet of to serve the Folsom Heights to our entire portfolio, and put that in perspective. I think that's a very important number.
And next in October sometime, I'll bring to you the water supply and demand report. It's an annual report that we do that shows we have sufficient water for many more connections.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, item 14, finance. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Public comment, anybody online?
President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 13.
Okay, now we'll move to finance. Thank you.
Is this your debut?
It's my second one.
Yeah, you weren't here.
So good morning for a few more minutes anyway. I'm Jamie Bandy, Director of Finance, and I'm here today to provide a financial status for the second quarter, so the period ending June 30th, 2022. Overall, the district is on track for the second quarter in both revenues and expenses. As of June 30th, we have recorded about $43 million in revenues and just under $28 million in expenses. Next slide, please. Looking at our first slide here at the district revenues by category, this basically shows kind of what we've recorded as of June 30th compared to what our 6-month adopted budget is. A couple of things I'd like to highlight on this slide is our hydropower sales. While it still looks like they're a little bit lower than anticipated, this is still due to the repairs that were being made because of the Caldor fire. We were back online early May, so there's only about half of the second quarter that we were actually generating revenue for here. The other item on here I'd like to point out is the grants. So actually Elizabeth talked a little bit about the $7 million that we received for the Folsom intake. We actually had initially budgeted for that in our 2022 budget, but we did receive those funds at the end of 2021. So we are on track for the grants that we are anticipating this year. And then lastly, the FCCs on here, we are also still on track for those. There are no material changes expected for this calendar year. Next slide, please. Moving on to our operating expenses, we are pretty much on track with everything. Our salaries and benefits still slightly under, and that's just because we're really still experiencing a little bit longer times to fill positions. Next slide, please.
I've got a question on our expenses. I really anticipated that our utility costs would be higher as we were pumping water up from other sources to compensate for the lack of water coming through the treatment plant 1. And so I really expected to see a spike in the PG&E. Any reason that didn't happen?
Not operations guy, talk money, but I'll talk water for you. So, it is true this year, due to the Caldor fire, for the members of the public, we did have to have an extended period of time to operate Reservoir 1. However, that in the big picture, 13 CFS, 8 CFS in spring is small. And you'll see, I know it's one of the things Jamie's working on, is there's 2 big factors that affect our electricity. Really wet flows for high wastewater in the winter, which fortunately we didn't have this year, and very high flows in the summer. So you're probably going to be asking the opposite question once our September PG&E bills come in because of the demand. So it comes out in the wash, but that's a relatively small in the overall electrical demand, or the operational demand for electricity. and then that gets reflected in the bills. So does that help explain that question?
Yeah, I think so. I think it, to my eyes, it opens the possibility that our outages might not be as severe as we think when we can actually pump the water that's available while we, let's say, do repairs on Res 1. And
the operational cost is not a significant factor. I think the operational reliability and the ability, especially during the warmer weather, to meet both consumptive demands as well as fire flows is our main operational concern. And that's really what we're trying to, and the slide park intertie will obviously help alleviate that challenge. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next slide. So this slide here, we're really just kind of looking and comparing where we stand at the end of the second quarter, year over year, from 21 to 22, and we're trending similarly to last year. Okay, fine, thank you. And as our insurance proceeds continue to come into the district for the business loss income as well as the property damage loss, I just kind of wanted to remind and highlight again that the reduction in our power revenues will be recovered from that business income loss insurance. The following slides include our 2022 to 2026 financial forecasts. There's no material changes for these at this time. Those documents are included in your board packet as well. Let's skip through. And today's presentation doesn't require any board action. It was just for information only. So thank you for your time. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any other questions? Director Day? Okay.
No, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 14, the June 30th, 2022 financial update? Please just indicate by raising your hand. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 14. We're ready for action item number 15.
Okay, action item number 15.
Move option 1.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve option 1 on finance.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 15, the ratification of the general warrant registers? Option 1 moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 15. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2? Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
Right. Item number 16.
Still morning. Good morning. I'm President Anzini and honorable board members.
You have 5 minutes.
No, she meant 5 minutes until it's afternoon.
That's about 5 seconds a slide, I think.
Yeah. She didn't mean he had to present in 5 minutes.
I'm John Kessler, and I'm representing engineering and hydro today. And this is a view of Silver Lake, primarily looking northward. And the item for your consideration today is to consider award of engineering and drilling contracts and some associated funding. Looking northward, Highway 88 is on the back side of the lake pretty much. The dam, can I roll it?
Remember that.
Be careful.
Remember the ball I took.
No, I don't. The dam and the boat ramp are in this vicinity. Kit Carson Road wraps around this side of the lake, and Kit Carson Lodge is on this side. And anyway, just a gem of a lake, so I'm happy to be here to talk about it. Previous board actions, November 8th, 2021, the board approved the 2022 through 26 capital improvement plan, which included this project subject to available funding. And earlier this year in February, the board authorized funding for the dam replacement project in the amounts of $50,000 for on-call hydrologic modeling services, $240,000 for engineering services, $40,000 for capitalized labor, and $20,000 in contingency for a total request of $350,000 for the project number 19031. So to understand our existing dam configuration, this is a cross section. The reservoir is left side here with an inlet tower for the outlet pipe that runs through the dam. And the original dam was made up of timber cribbing filled with earth and rock fill. The timber crib isn't shown here, but those would be arranged here just inside the rock masonry. And added to that over time was a gunite face on the reservoir side to help seal leakage. On the downstream face, the highway used to travel over the dam and result in actually consolidation of the dam and kind of compression of that crest to where Caltrans was in the position of adding layers of asphalt to it every few years. And so what also resulted was the rock face, which was not wet masonry. This is an error. It was dry masonry, but those rocks started to move out and basically compromise the integrity of that facing. So a buttress built with concrete cribbing and rock fill was built in 1986, and that kind of resisted that, those forces and that effects on the dam. The outlet's a 32-inch pipe that was deteriorated originally and was replaced with a 26-inch grouted in between that in that annulus. So looking, remember in dam speak, we talk about looking downstream as our right and left reference. So this is a view looking across the dam from right to left. And this is that concrete cribbing with rock backfill. And this is the outlet structure here. This is the fish ladder that you can see enlarged in the lower right. There's actually a leakage weir that feeds into that fish ladder, and you see it's been modified with a weir plate to help monitor the leakage rate. On the left side, or far side, is the spillway structure. You really can't see that in this view, but it's just beyond this concrete wall. That's the right side wall to the spillway. And crossing here is Highway 88, so it was realigned in the 2000s. I don't recall the year, but basically from the dam crest to this bridge crossing the Silver Fork American River more recently. So looking upstream at the spillway structure, there's two radial gates, also a flashboard section here on dam left to our right. And the draft is limited to, because of our license conditions, to after September 15th. And then we also have a DSOD requirement for the spillway that the gates be open by November 1st. So the point is there's only about a 6-week opportunity to use the upper portion of our storage capacity, and that's about 5,000 out of the 8,900 acre feet total capacity that we have to put to use, or else it could be wasted when those gates are open as of November 1st. Some of the long-term reliability issues with the spillway is that it cannot pass a probable maximum flood. That's a flood of magnitude that would discharge about 11,000 CFS compared to the spillway capacity on the order of 7,500. And it would result, through the hydrologic modeling for this worst-case storm, in an overtopping of the dam of over 3 feet for over 24 hours. And it's expected the dam, because it's essentially an embankment dam, would fail as a result of that. Another issue, kind of a lesser extent, but seismic stability with the left side. Oh. Am I okay now? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jen. So seismic stability is another issue that is yet to be resolved. The physical data, this is a view from right to left looking across the upstream face. As I mentioned, the existing capacity is about 8,900 acre feet. That results in a depth of storage of about 22.7 feet. And this is the full operating range. So we don't really have a dead storage, or I should say a carryover storage so much in this lake through winter. We're able to use its full contents and basically pass the natural inflow. There is a natural lake that's upstream of the dam, which is on the order of 3,000 acre feet, that's maintained by just its natural conditions. Dam dimensions, 280 feet long by 32 feet high. We talked about the 26-inch outlet, which has a capacity of about 75 CFS, somewhat limiting for what we'd like to be able to do. And the reservoir capacity, when the spillway is open, like I mentioned, we lose about 5,000 acre feet of the total capacity during that period, November 1 through April 1 of the following year. Another issue is the gunite.
Pardon me.
Yes?
Well, why do we have to open the gates during that winter period?
So it's intended to pass the greatest magnitude potential floods. And so because of that wet season from November until April 1st, that's the season, as you know, we see the greatest effects. We could have a rain on snow event, which would produce even more inflow. And in order to pass that flood without overtopping the dam, the spillway has to be open during that time. And that's a requirement of the State Division of Safety of Dams.
So that's a quote unquote temporary requirement until we wouldn't have that requirement if we rehabilitate this dam?
So it's been a long-term requirement. It's not something imposed temporarily, but the new dam configuration would exclude gates and allow us to maintain up to full capacity year-round if we chose to do that. Of course, there would be some cycling of the reservoir to allow for the natural inflow period of winter and spring to capture that and not be at full lake, so we would spill it and lose it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's kind of an important point.
You'll see it in one of these slides, the new, not having the waste case.
Yeah, I saw the little triangle view.
So the gunite face, as you can see, is very checked, cracked, spalling here on kind of the lower right side. That's more prominent than it looks here. And it's been the result of something that requires more frequent repairs. And that frequency seems to be increasing over time just as its integrity diminishes. It does jeopardize our water supply in that as we start filling the lake in the spring with the snow melt, we don't always anticipate or can see where basically that leakage would occur through those openings in the upstream face. So we can start the fill and basically have to reverse that, bring it back down to below where the openings are and have to perform repairs and delay the fill, which can compromise our ability to ultimately fill the lake, which could also affect the recreation season as well. And most importantly, or very importantly, our water supply availability. So now as we look back to better understand what's in the current structure, this is a photo from 1917, but it depicts the 1876 construction. You see the timber crib. It's kind of like a Lincoln log setup. It's filled with rock and gravel and voids, or gravel and earth, soil. Those timber members lead to development of voids because they've been degrading over the time. So you can imagine after more than 100 years that they're just not made to last indefinitely. And that affects the consolidation of the dam. We have voids that develop, and it affects the overall structural integrity to see that kind of sponginess open up porosity rather than something that remains tightly consolidated. And speaking of voids, we had a sinkhole developed in 2015 that right adjacent to one of our piezometers, this white tubing here, and that's how we measure the saturated water level within the dam. But we chased it, and we found that, fortunately, it seemed to be localized. There wasn't indication that this was more widespread. We opened up an area that was about 4 by 6 to look at for evidence of more widespread development, and that was not the case. It was limited to the hole itself, so that was backfilled with concrete. And it's performed well since then. No void since then. So if we look at an overview of the issues, FERC and DSOD require that we address some long-term reliability issues, and those include the degrading 1876 era timber crib, and the potential for voids, the seepage control, which when that exists, if there is potential for internal erosion of that earth fill, basically a piping or basically a loss of the fill and a creation of voids and a loss of potential a big leak, which can lead to a failure of the dam. The spillway capacity, not being unable to pass that probable maximum flood without overtopping, and the seismic stability issue with the spillway. So when we looked at long-term reliability fixes, we did conduct an alternatives analysis. And the first approach was to look at repair options, and that entailed grouting the existing voids, drilling down from the crest and basically trying to fill any openings between what exists today, to line the upstream face and then enlarge the spillway. But the downside of that is the timbers will continue to rot. And so we don't really arrest that long-term issue with a grouting approach. The next option we looked at was replace, and that mitigates all the dam safety issues. And so the district has advised FERC and DSOD that we intend to replace the dam, which they support. And just to highlight long-term reliability versus current day, we inspect the dam frequently ourselves. We're out there several times a week. Our folks are trained on what to look for. I'm out there on occasion. Our FERC and DSOD representatives are out there at least once a year. We have an independent consultant who also inspects the dam for safety once every 5 years. And all the conclusions are that the dam is safe for continued operation. So we're talking just to emphasize long-term reliability. There's no imminent or there's no near-term issues right now with the dam. So looking at the repair alternative, we talked about drilling down and grouting the voids within. It would also add this flexible liner on the upstream face, and it also cap the crest with concrete so that it could spill over. Since the spillways doesn't have adequate capacity, it would try to fix that issue with basically an overpour of the existing dam crest. And this is just another view of that. And the replacement option would be with a roller compacted concrete dam. And this is the plan view downstream is towards the top of the page. It shows the main outlet being something that would kind of reach into the deeper part of the reservoir in the vicinity of the dam and wrap around and then discharge to the Silver Fork American downstream. The spillway you can see is a fixed crest. There are no operating gates with this idea. That spill crest would be right at our normal maximum water surface elevation. So we basically, carry full lake until we lost anything. And one of the issues with the current kind of geology is that we have this rhyolite tuff formation that extends quite a ways in the vicinity of the right abutment. So another concept is to construct a slurry trench, which would essentially be a seepage cutoff that goes, and that would be excavated down to bedrock, as would the entire dam foundation to bedrock. And we'd be able to carry that out and avoid any seepage path that could have potentially affect the safety of the dam in the future. The concept for the dam has evolved a little bit since this was done several years ago. We're now thinking about an additional outlet here in the center that would also control lake level besides the normal low-level outlet. We're thinking about how we control the flow, whether it's a downstream valve house versus upstream gate configuration, but those are all still in the works. We're also looking at maintaining access over the top of the dam with a bridge over the spillway construction, as you can see here. This is a side view of what the roller compacted concrete might look like, but the main takeaway here is that because it's like a ag-based or road-based material that includes cement, it doesn't have the kind of abrasion resistance that conventional concrete has. So there would be a facing on both sides and over the top with conventional concrete to basically harden the structure and make it resilient to any kind of wear. Rather than a stair step, which is ideal for energy dissipation, at least one approach, we're looking at a smoother face and a plunge pool, basically to, smoother face would be more easy to maintain, less subject to spalling and degradation over time from freeze-thaw action. And because of our current design criteria for the spillway is a probable maximum flood, even the extended dam crest, fixed weir, from what we currently know, but that's going to be revisited with an info design flood study to determine if PMF is still the appropriate study or whether something less than that magnitude of flood is appropriate and supported. But one way to get more capacity out of basically the same length of spillway is to go with a labyrinth design. And so this is something that's we've currently have within our design criteria to look at this. And you can see that essentially it elongates the spillway by the zig and the zag built into this. And these have been built elsewhere and have performed well. You can see they're built with conventional concrete. One modification for us would be looking at a bridge over the top, which would also allow our access for debris, whether it's woody debris or ice, to remove that. One of the things that's important in terms of dam safety is maintaining your spillway capacity, not having a restriction. So the replacement attributes are, it mitigates all the deficiencies. It eliminates the fall-winter storage restrictions associated with spillway opening requirements and improves our operating flexibility. It achieves a higher confidence of dam safety and reliability by FERC, DOCD, and ourselves, lowers the construction and life cycle cost, reduces construction schedule, and results in a longer useful life. Other project benefits, it's a more dependable water supply. It reduces our risk of unplanned lake drawdown for emergency maintenance, as we experience today, avoids the potential for FERC and or DOCD imposed lake level restrictions due to a condition of the dam, potentially higher fall carryover storage in some years, increased water supply for late season firefighting, and some downstream flood protection benefits, although it's minimal considering the size of the watershed. Operationally, we're looking at a passive spillway rather than something we have to respond to with urgency to get up and operate the gates when the big one comes in. And we're potentially looking at SCADA control of the outlet releases, which right now are all manual in person. And so having remote control of that would be a huge enhancement as well. In terms of the site, looking down on it, we own the property here. So that's a real plus that in terms of developing the plans, and it's just one last step involved in a very complicated process. We do own land on the other side here too. Not anticipating we'll need that at this point, but it's there if we need it. There's also a power line that runs to Kirkwood Meadows Public Utilities District along this north side of the highway and the bridge. And so if we decide that we want to go with line power for the construction season, which we're looking at potentially 8-10 months, as well as future operations, that's a possibility to secure that. We've done some legwork to talk to them, and that looks doable. And so some of the work that we've already completed is the design criteria memorandum, or a basis of design. And just to give you a flavor of the kinds of things we look at, the existing dam, we're trying to learn from what we have as we go forward with a new design, a new arrangement. We look at the current design, construction, operation, site conditions, historical performance. And for the new dam, we've established some project objectives. Operating flows and lake levels are clearly identified, understand the geology and seismicity. The inflow design flood we talked about, the PMF, spillway design, dam type. We did consider some options there, but it still looks like RCC is favorable at this time. Primarily as a cost savings. Other loading cases, the low outlet works. We talked about actually adding a second outlet rather than just relying on one. Power supply, bridge access across the spillway, seepage cutoff on that right abutment to keep that from being an issue going forward, and controlled diversion of water during construction. And you'll see how that plays into some of the work that we're asking your approval of in just a sec. So for the engineering services, we're looking at a 3-year term from fall 2022 through 2025. And their first task is to oversee the geotechnical investigations if approved by the board and preparing a geotech data report. And then next summer, when we have a full lake, they would also oversee the sediment depth probing, and we'll show a drawing for that in a second. Performing hydrology and hydraulic analyses, preparing 30, 60, and 100% design plans and specifications with constructability review, construction cost estimating, and schedule updates at each phase. Preparing various FERC-required documents, supporting our meetings with FERC and DSOD, including conducting a potential failure modes analysis workshop for the new dam at 60% design. And that's kind of a really important task or activity in that it's something we do after the fact with our current dams, and at least once every 5 years as part of the independent consultant's inspection. And it's the way that we shake out all the what ifs. The dam, what if the dam's overtopped? Is it going to be resilient to that? What if this seismic event occurs? How does the dam respond to that? And so to build that into the design, that recognition of those what ifs really gives us something that we can feel we're doing everything we can to anticipate having a structure that doesn't require further modification for many years. Providing support of our environmental permitting and funding activities, and preparing construction bid docs and providing bidding support. So our responses to the engineering services RFP, we had 6 firms join us up at Silver Lake for a mandatory pre-proposal meeting, and 2 submitted proposals. Both were responsive to the RFP criteria. GEI's proposal was lowest cost. You can see a difference of about $370,000 with their proposal just being under $1.5 million. And their team demonstrated the most experience in providing dam replacement rehab services as needed for Silver Lake Dam. And those were really our main criteria. So switching gears to the geotechnical and drilling services, which we anticipate drilling this fall, and the sediment depth probing in 2023. They would perform 5 exploratory borings, associated testing, sample collection, and backfill of the borings this fall. And the reason that's important is that we need to know that information for the foundation design. Things like, how fractured or what is the joint pattern of the rock. If you remember Teton Dam, that was a situation on the first filling of the lake. That was an embankment dam, but it was that pressure from the reservoir that built up and came up through the rock foundation, and they didn't have an adequate grout curtain to stop it, and it basically caused a piping and a failure of the dam. The reservoir sediment depth probing in the vicinity of the dam, a boat ramp next late spring, early summer, and that supports the cofferdam design and constructability. So we need to understand how we can get those down to solid material, and there's several feet of sediment in that vicinity, as we know. So looking at those geotech services, here the largest red circles are the borings, and what you see are 4 across pretty much the main axis of the dam and extending into that right abutment where the bedrock goes deeper. And then there's one more here up along the rim by Kit Carson Road, near the vicinity of Oyster Creek Saddle, and this is the area where we have the natural leakage that goes on that makes up part of our license condition flow release from Silver Lake, that and the flow release into the Silver Fork itself from the dam. So this will give us, what is the existing foundation, give us targets for additional data. And Director Dwyer, you had asked a question when we were out a month or so ago about let's not repeat our experience at Forebay Dam, where we had the surprise of rock and a lot of extra work because of that. So if you can imagine, Forebay Dam, that buttress had a footprint of, 600 feet long and 100 feet downstream and so on. So very broad area, and you select borings where you think you need them. But here we're looking at a much more linear footing and foundation, something that's more like 30 to 40 feet wide at the base, and something that there's less likelihood to miss. So other information we know, just to help, is we did replace the outlet structure back in 2010, I think it was, 2012. And we were actually able to grab some information about the bedrock in that immediate vicinity. The bedrock is shallow here on the left half of the dam, and it's very exposed downstream of the dam, so we can read that and understand that it's likely indicative of what's underneath this portion of the dam. We also have piezometers that have been bored. This shows B1, 2, 3, and 4 over here. Those were logged at the time they were bored, and so we know the depth to bedrock, we know the material within that was extracted, and so all that's very helpful. And you can see the emphasis is on the boring information, collecting those samples, is not only to go through the dam embankment, but go down below into the bedrock by tens of feet. So these vary, I believe, from 30 to 75 feet in depth overall, the shallowest being here where the bedrock is shallowest and going deeper to the right, as well as this one here at Oyster Creek Saddle. Then we're also looking at seismic refraction, which also gives us another indication of what that ground or bedrock profile looks like. So you can see some along the dam axis here, some perpendicular going upstream, downstream, again through that soft zone, and both going kind of parallel to the rim of the lake and perpendicular here at Oyster Creek Saddle as well. This has always been a mystery here. We've never had any subsurface information. The reason that it's important, plays into this, is that we're looking at filling in a low spot, maybe raising it 3 feet or so, anticipating the reservoir operation going forward. So looking at kind of a front view of the drilling or downstream view, you can see the spillway. You can see this line between the purple and the orange layers that kind of defines the bedrock. That's interpolated between previous borings that were done, but it just shows that what is the known pattern is there's rhyolite tuff. We're going to have to get down through this, get into bedrock. That surface will have to be clean. If it's, you know, basically uneven and needs to be smooth, or we may need to pour a kind of a leveling slab to build the roller compacted concrete up for that. So you can anticipate that there will be some foundation work depending on what we learn. But here you see borings up to 75 feet deep, excuse me. So our response to the geotech and drilling services, we had 4 geotech firms, drilling contractors attend the mandatory pre-proposal meeting at Silver Lake, and 2 submitted proposals, Greg Drilling and Tabor Drilling. Both were responsive to the RFP criteria. Tabor's proposal was lowest cost, and their team demonstrates appropriate experience in services as needed for Silver Lake Dam. And you can see quite a span between costs, just under $168,000 for the low bid from Tabor, compared to almost $307,000 from Greg Drilling. As the status of our drilling program plan, it's something we had to prepare and submit for review with both FERC and DSOD. They have both reviewed the plan. We've received their comments, and we've addressed those comments. We sent out revision 2 just this past Friday, and we're expecting approval by them by the end of the month. They've both been really responsive and understand the urgency for this, so we can capture drilling this season before the snow flies. So our current schedule, which has been FERC approved, some of the work that's already been done is the project development phase, the design criteria memo and drilling program plan I was just referring to. 30% design is slated to be completed next summer. The geotech investigations this fall, and what it doesn't show is the breakout for the sediment depth probing. I forgot to point out the sediment depth probes in an earlier slide. Maybe I should just go back to that. And just take a second. So these red dots, the P1 through 15 here, out within the reservoir bed are the sediment depth probing. So we expect to launch a barge from the existing boat ramp. This white circle is the current log boom, and so that would be removed for access temporarily. But from the barge, we're able to work a rig down and work its way down through the sediment depth and measure the depth to that. And we can, from that, we can understand how much sediment needs to be removed in order to put in a series of cofferdams. Right now, we anticipate potentially 3, and that could go in as early as winter of the year of construction to kind of take advantage of conditions when the water is low and low inflows, and then work with 2 larger cofferdams close to the dam that would isolate right and left, and those would be constructed kind of in separate phases. Oh, I missed part of that. So looking ahead, 60% design, or the sequent NEPA environmental review and permitting is something that we're thinking about now, and Brian Deason and his group are looking at kind of dovetailing with design, and when we have 30% design as being the point where we have a pretty good description of the project, making a real effort on our public outreach. And you can see we expect that to kind of run concurrently with the design phases. 60% design complete in June of 2024, 100% design by December of 2025. FERC license amendment by the following fall, construction bidding and potentially construction by 2027, subject to when the funding is available by the bond and, of course, all this process. We are looking at trying to work this very closely where we could be ready a year earlier, but again, that's subject to a lot of other things. So, and time is money, so we're doing what we can to work through the process as efficiently as we can. So the environmental activity integration in 2023, as I mentioned, we intend to initiate the public outreach and environmental review. The project requires compliance with CEQA, NEPA, and a FERC license amendment, and it will be subject to various federal, state, and local permits. And those proactive outreach efforts to engage agencies and interested stakeholders early in the design process at 30% design.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just too soon for me to ask that question. There's a large amount of money coming from the federal government for infrastructure. Is there any chance that we can apply for funding for this and it could be set aside?
If there's anything available, we certainly apply for it. Normally, when it's a condition of a license or a condition of DOSD, it may be ineligible. Brian, you have anything to add?
We've been talking about funding for this and other projects lately, and Silver Lake Dam was at the top of the list, and we've been asking some expert consultants for help to help us look through there. I think if there is going to be any funding for dam safety, it'll come from the federal government, from the infrastructure bill, from federal government, instead of, state funding.
Okay.
We haven't gotten anything real positive yet. Like, there's a lot of money for this type of project, but we'll keep looking. But I think it's
like I said, it might be just a little too soon, but it's if it's on the top of our list, it makes sense to me. Yeah.
It's there. We'll go for it.
Okay.
So our funding requirements at this point in time for engineering services up to and including construction bidding, just under 1.5 million. Geotech investigations and drilling services, just under 168,000. Seismic refraction surveys and laboratory material testing that come from the borings, 50,000. Preliminary environmental services, 100,000. Capitalized labor, 600,000. Subtotal of about 2.4 million, 15% contingency, 363,000. A total funding requests of just under 2.8 million, 2,780,747. Funding for this project is included in the current CIP, for which $2,150,000 was allocated for this 5-year period. The funding source, I think, is subject to change, as Brian alluded to and Jim, that we're looking at pursuing grant funding, but we also expect a bond to be necessary to carry out construction. And this funding excludes more detailed environmental services and construction costs, of course, which will be presented as the project develops into later phases. So for next steps, we're looking at conducting the geotech drilling during this fall, and then again next spring, summer, initiate our design activities this fall, initiate environmental field studies during next spring, return to the board with project update and contract award for environmental services around the summer of next year at 30% design, including the EIR for CEQA compliance, the EA for NEPA compliance, and the FERC license amendment. Our board options. Option 1, award of contracts to GEI in the not to exceed amount of $1,499,967 for engineering services and tabor drilling in the not to exceed amount of $167,780 for geotechnical investigation and drilling services, and authorize additional funding of $50,000 for seismic refraction surveys and laboratory material testing, $100,000 for preliminary environmental services, $600,000 for capitalized labor, and $363,000 for contingency, for a total funding request of $2,780,747 for the Silver Lake Dam replacement project, project number 19031. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action.
Move 1. I do have a question, though.
You can't ask it until I second.
Would you second it, please?
Yes.
Questions?
This question for Mr. Deason, I'm assuming that this is a replacement of an existing facility that we ultimately could get a negative deck out of this. Is that?
Well, I appreciate that. We certainly always explore the most effective way to comply with the various laws and regulations. My recommendation would be we pursue an EIR for this project, just to ensure that we don't get through the process and then have to start over.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine. I do have a request. Concurrent with this, if you could, the staff could explore a funding from the state recreation department or whatever like we got from Caples, the boat ramp.
Yeah,
I'd like to really put a righteous boat ramp in there and a contingent upon availability of a grant. You know, there is grant money out there for recreation. I'd like you guys to explore that too, concurrent with this project, because they've got equipment there already. It makes sense just to do the whole project together.
And George, what size is your boat?
As long as it'll hold a 21-foot boat, that's all that matters.
I was thinking of a 16-foot boat with an outboard.
There you go.
Well, since there are apparently no fish in Caples Lake, I'm not sure why you need to.
Exactly. All right, so we have.
President Anzini?
Yes, Director Day.
Yeah, yes, thank you. John, what is the best guess estimate of the current total cost of the project? You knew I was going to ask.
As long as you don't hold us to that when we update the board's long-term final CIP number.
No, I understand.
I wouldn't even quote those.
Director Day, hi, this is Elizabeth. GEI did some very rough back of the envelope kind of preliminary cost estimates back when we were doing the feasibility analysis. And I think it was really more for comparison of refurbishing the dam versus reconstructing the dam. And so you know, to say those estimates that were provided, I don't know if I actually recall what those exact estimates were at the time, but they're really going to be inaccurate at this day and age. So I think we need to wait for us to get through design and bring those cost estimates forward to the board.
You know, we don't want to guess 20 million, 50 million.
No, I don't want to put a wager on that right now.
Maybe we should put it half the price of the Folsom project.
That would be nice, but we also got a bad surprise on that one. So, all right, I'll wait.
As soon as we get good numbers or relatively good numbers, we'll bring it back to the board, probably sometime next year.
Right. It's not easy
Thank
to
you.
estimate. There's not too many complete rebuilds of dams, you know, in the state of California. It's pretty easy for us to estimate pipeline projects and even some treatment plant upgrades, but for a dam rebuild, that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would just add that there is cost, construction cost estimating at each phase of design at 30, 60, 100%. And that first phase should be available to us next summer.
This falls under the
Thank you.
phrase of 100% almost maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, Director Dwyer, and then let's vote.
John, I got a question. It's kind of a wild card. You mentioned the power lines that are running along the road there, which made me think, is there any possibility of a small hydro? Have you even thought of that right there?
That is within our review, within our design criteria memorandum to look at that. So with an outlet and a consistent flow, there is potential for that. It's not a lot of drop or a lot of head. You know, we're talking 20 feet when the lake is full.
Right.
But still, that's something. And it wouldn't be enough, of course, or it wouldn't be operating when we need it for construction. So we need to look at portable generators versus having line power, which have some environmental benefits and would also help us
and
down
maybe
the road.
maybe some funding benefits as well for the green energy solutions. The other comment I guess I have is it's going to be another PR challenge, and I don't think it's too soon to engage the cabin owners, property owners, and the resort that's there and start communicating with them so that the rumors don't get out of hand, and we can do it with fact and say, here's what we're looking at, here's our schedule, you know, because they'll be quickly saying, EID is going to drain our lake, and we need to counter that with fact. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that comment.
Anybody online who wants to speak?
This is the public comment period for action item number 16. Option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. President Zini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. Are you ready for me to call for the vote?
Yes, we are.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other items that we need to talk about before we adjourn this meeting?
Just please review the tentatively scheduled items. If you have any questions, please get a hold of me.
So we'll see everybody on October 10th.
11th.
Oh, 11th?
October 10th is a holiday
No.
for the district, so our next meeting will be on October 11th. Now that I've said that, let me double check. Yes, October 11th
Okay. We'll see you on the 11th. Motion adjourned.
at 12:42.
Meeting adjourned, I'm sorry.